Go. All right. We are live. It looks like let's see. All right, let's see. Well, welcome everyone who's joining in. Hope y'all are having a great day. Had some great conversations yesterday, hoping to continue the trend. But let's see. Let's see. Welcome everyone. How are y'all doing? Welcome, Zach. Let's see.
How you doing, Catholic dude?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I can't complain. Do you mind if I record this?
No, go ahead.
All right, give me 1 second. I gotta turn my recorder on.
I'm recording it already, so would be unfair of me to say you couldn't.
Can you share a file? I mean, I have to record it from my side, but
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, it would be unfair for me to tell you no if I'm already doing it.
yeah. I understand. I just wanted. Okay, I couldn't speak. That was weird.
Yeah, if you're off the app, like even if it's like in mini screen mode, it won't let you talk.
That's crazy. All right, so here's the question I want to ask you: is it true? And please don't be offended by these questions because I need to know for myself because
Mm-hmm.
I'm fed up with rumors. And you say you're a Catholic Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Christians are Catholics.
So all Catholics are Christians, but not all Christians are Catholic. It's kind of like how all dogs are mammals, but not all mammals are dogs. So the way that what happened in history is you had the Christian church. And you'll have people who will debate on it, but as early as I want to say like 110, the term Catholic was already being used to describe this church. And the term Catholic just means universal. And over time, The universal church, you know, encountered different heresies and different schisms until eventually you had the Orthodox Church with the what is now called the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church has different rites within it, you know, the Roman Rite, the Byzantine Rite, and so on and so forth. Then you have Martin Luther, who starts the Protestant Reformation and starts his own branch of Christianity, and that continued to splinter off into other different Christian groups. So they're all of us are Christian. Catholic just refers to the specific theological tradition of Christianity that I belong to.
Ah, okay. Now, I'm going to ask you some more questions if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Is it true that Catholics worship statues when they talk to Mary or saints and stuff and they carry beads?
So, no. So, the understanding of worship that we have, especially within Catholicism, is one, it is bound to sacrifice, and two, it is the recognition of God as God and I am not, to kind of put it in very simple terms. So, the idea of statues has to do with a particular way of translating one of the Ten Commandments about the graven images. And there's individuals who will take that interpretation very, very literally, where it's, hey, you can't even make a graven image, period. The problem with that is you have God himself in the Old Testament commanding graven images to be made. You have the bronze serpent being made to heal the people after they were bitten by the serpents in the wilderness. You have the angels being made on the Ark of the Covenant. You even have on the fabric of the tabernacle, back when it was still a tent, you had the four archangels depicted on that fabric. So even in Jewish tradition, you have images of the divine being made. The idea of the graven image being equated to worship isn't necessarily found in tradition. Now, the other issue comes in where it confuses us asking the saints to pray for us and equating that with worship. So the way to understand it, like I love using the Hail Mary as an example. The first half of the Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. That is the greeting of the angel Gabriel to Mary and the greeting of Elizabeth to Mary. So we are quoting scripture right there. The second half is, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. We are not asking her to do anything that is proper to God. We're asking her to pray for us, just like I would ask my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ to pray for me, even while they're here on earth. This is further supported both by St. Paul, where he talks about we are one body in Christ. And since when we are baptized, we're a part of that one body, the body isn't cut off at death. There's not like two halves to this body of Christ. We are still connected through baptism with our departed brothers and sisters. And you even see in the catacombs at Rome, the early Christians, we have graffiti, I think dating around 200 AD, graffiti saying, Peter, Paul, pray for us. So even in the early church, you have people asking the saints to pray for them. And so when we're praying to the saints, that's really all we're doing, is we're asking them, hey, can you please pray for us?
Okay, so the Christians have a problem with it. Can you still hear me? Because I'm actually cleaning clothes. So Christians have a problem with it because they say that you're talking to the dead. How are the saints alive?
Well, as Jesus himself said to the Pharisees, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So when he said that I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, since he can't be the God of the dead, they must still be living. When we are baptized, we are alive in Christ. And so even after our physical death, we are still alive because they're alive in heaven.
Okay. So that's what the Catholic Church. Now, here's another thing,
Mm-hmm.
and this is not an attack on Catholic or anything, just honest questions, and you've been answering them.
Yep.
I'm going to ask some very serious questions.
That's fine.
We know it's not the person that commits the crime, but it's the priest that commit the crime. How come most of the crime that is got to consider to like stuff that's really gruesome is always leading to the Catholic Church and the Christian Church? You know what I'm saying, Father Willing?
Are you asking like about the abuse scandal that happened with the priests abusing their the children in their congregation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You got it. Yes, sir. And I'm
I
not
mean,
trying to be weird or
yeah, and
nothing.
even Jesus and Paul themselves said, "Beware of the wolves in sheep's clothing." Like, beware of the enemy from within. Like, just because there's individuals that have done horrible things in the name of God and wearing, like Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Christ, or the title of apostle, the same as Peter and Paul. So the fact of the matter is that just because there's people who have done horrible things within the church community, it doesn't necessarily mean that the church herself is bad. So, yes, I agree with you that these are people who have done horrible things and that they've done horrible things in the name of God, but that doesn't make them right.
Doesn't that bother you, though, as an individual that says that you believe in God, that people don't have discernment who are supposed to be leaders in the church? I'm like an interviewer, but I interview like religious people and people that believe religiously in their, in their religion, So please don't take it personal. It's just, I need to know these answers because people just don't have patience anymore. They get so excited over nothing.
Well, the thing is there's even like within like, suppose you are someone who values the scientific method, who values truth, and so you follow the scientific method and you use the scientific method to the best of your ability. Yet there's people who will use some and cherry pick some niche scientific things to commit horrible atrocities. They'll use it to support eugenics. There's people who will use it to support, you know, what happened with World War II. There's horrible things that have happened that are justified through science. But that doesn't make science itself or the truth that science reveals any less true or any less valuable. So just because there's individuals who have abused the trust and system within the church, like you have the same level of abuse, if not more so, occurring within the public school system with the same level of cover up. Yet we don't talk about needing to shut down the public school systems or stop teaching what the schools teach, because those are two unrelated aspects. Yes, it's taking place within that institution, but that doesn't make what the institution teaches any less true.
You got a point there, but here's another point. If I can throw it at you, if that's okay, is this is supposed to be an institution of God, not the institution of the land. So, being that's God, it's spiritual, and everything is discerned in the spirit. Correct?
Not necessarily. So the belief of the Catholic Church is that the Holy Spirit is going to guide the church's declarations towards truth, but it's not going to protect the human beings within it from evil and from sin. The only way that we as individuals and humans are able to have that protection from sin is by participating and cooperating with the sacraments and the graces. If someone is not cooperating with the sacraments and the graces provided to them, they're not going to receive the protection that is required. And if they're not receiving that protection that is required, then unfortunately they are going to commit more and more atrocities and sins, even if they claim to be a holy individual.
Wow. I didn't even know that. Wow. So let me ask you, are you considered like a junior pope or something? Because you know a lot of stuff.
No, no. So when I was growing up, my mother told me that ever since I was like 4 years old, I was already talking about wanting to be a priest. And I was in a unique situation where I was actually confirmed in the Byzantine rite. I am a Roman Catholic. I practice under that rite, but I was confirmed under the Byzantine rite. And they confirm and baptize and give first communion to infants, so it's done all at once. Um, so I received the sacrament of confirmation when I was like 3 years old, and one of the gifts of confirmation is the gift of wisdom from the Holy Spirit. And so I attribute the knowledge that I have to the fact that I've had that gift of confirmation ever since I was 3 years old, which is unusual for a Roman Catholic. And then I distinctly remember at the age of like 6 thinking, if I am going to be a priest and teach people the faith, I better know the faith that I'm going to be teaching to these people. So since I was like 6 years old, I've been consuming and reading and learning as much as I can about Catholic faith, philosophy, and theology. By middle school, I was already reading commentaries on the Summa Theologica, and high school and college, I was reading and finishing up the Summa. And so I've been studying the Catholic faith for well over 20 years. I was in seminary for 2.5 years, but after 2.5 years, I decided that while God wanted me in seminary for that time period, the priesthood was not where he wanted me to be.
Wow. So are you like going through different faiths to find your faith, or do you believe you found your faith?
Oh no, I still believe in Catholicism. Like when I say left seminary, it's not that I left the Catholic faith. Seminary is a school and process to become a Catholic priest. So I'm still Catholic. I'm just not becoming a priest.
Ah, okay, I see what you're saying. So there's certain things you don't agree with then.
No, I agree with everything the Catholic Church says. It has nothing to do with like it's kind of like you go to a trade school to become a carpenter, and then you decide after a few years, you know what, carpentry isn't what I want to do. I want to be a lineman. So it's not that you have anything against carpentry or the trades. You're still in a trade. You're just not pursuing it in that capacity.
Ah, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, my experience is really like directly with God. I never really like I went to churches and stuff. I went to Catholic churches, I went to Christian churches, I went to Lutheran churches, Protestant, and I never could really take a grip of that. So my encounter with God is directly. Do you believe that's possible?
Yeah. It is possible to have, and even within the Catholic faith, like you can have a direct encounter with God. Um, the the belief that I have is that the Catholic faith is the one that was instituted by Christ, that has the direct succession to the apostles and has the authority given by Christ to the apostles that has been continuously handed down through the bishops. But just like how Paul points out that the Greeks were worshiping gods with the altar to the unknown God, I believe it's possible for someone that's not a Catholic to have that direct encounter with God, even if it's not the fullness that like Paul was trying to give to the Greeks.
Yeah. So you do believe that anything is possible with God?
Yep.
Well, how come people don't believe that? And when you tell them, they think you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Um, it has to do with like I can't really comment on like other people's knowledge or anything like that, but in my experience, people don't engage with the faith as seriously as, or not as seriously, because they don't encounter the theology as deeply as they should. Um, uh, like they're still very religious and they're still having that encounter with God, but there's like just on Christianity alone, there's over 2,000 years of history of theological writings, and a lot of people think that just showing up once a week, listening to the the sermon is enough to get you everything you need to know about the Christian faith. And I don't think
Nice try.
that's true.
Nice try. Like a book could tell you who God is. Good luck with that one. Spiritual things are learned spiritually.
Yep.
No, I really appreciate this discussion because it's peaceable and it's fruitful. Because, people can learn instead of speculate. Oh, I hate you because you're a Catholic. Oh, this because you're Christian. You know them by their fruits, and their fruit is if it's the fruit of the Spirit or if it's the fruit of flesh.
Exactly.
So, yeah, man, I really enjoyed our discussion. My name is Elder John. If
Nice
you
to
want to
meet you.
check out you too. It's good to meet you too for a change. This is not my regular account. My regular account is Bananaed. But
Okay.
I wanted to say this to you. Do you got a piece of paper and a pen?
I do not, but I got a pretty good memory, so I'll be able to. And I
Okay.
did give this account a follow, so you can also message me the information afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. Servant Jon Testimony. It's on YouTube. It's
Okay.
known around the world. I'm the guy that went to heaven for 10 days, and I also went to hell. I saw hell.
Hmm.
So it was a pleasure talking with you, and I just got to rest now because I'm getting over a cold. My wife is a teacher's aide.
Okay.
So what she does is she takes care of handy able children.
Yeah.
So what happens is she brings that cold over
Yep.
to the house, and then she gives it to me. So I'm getting over on it now. So, but I hope you have a beautiful day, and thank you for your time. Stay safe and
Absolutely.
healthy.
Absolutely. You too as well. All right. All right. Let's see. Well, that was a pleasant conversation. Let's see. We got a couple of requests. I think Charter was up. If he's still here. Does not look like it. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me, Charter?
Hello. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I am well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. What brings you up today?
Well, your title caught my eye, and I was listening to your last conversation, so I thought I would chime in and ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, to the opposite, do you think atheism is then not rational? Because it doesn't have to be both or one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. I agree 100% with that. So it is possible to hold a wrong conclusion for rational reasons, and it's possible to hold the right conclusion for irrational reasons. So the reason for the prompt in the title is, and I know it's somewhat of a minority, but it's a very loud and vocal minority, that feel like if you hold to the idea that God exists, it doesn't matter what got you there, it's irrational. Like the journey to God exists is an irrational journey no matter what. And I hope to show and open people's eyes and perspectives on that it's possible for one to hold that belief for a rational reason.
Okay, so I can actually get behind your argument if you're going to argue as a deist, meaning that you're trying to say that there's a rational reason for a prime mover, an initial prime mover.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I don't agree, I can actually get behind that. The difference that I feel you and I are going to differ on is I think when you move into the realm of theism, where not only are you claiming a prime mover, but you are claiming this prime mover knows you and you are given personal attributes, you can't blame me for then saying you might be tempting the irrational there because you're going
Yeah.
beyond the scope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you more than I think you would expect. The way that I like to describe it is I can demonstrate or show that, there is a prime mover. In fact, I do have on my TikTok an argument that I'm working on. I'm working on a book that, and I already have the skeleton of it, but the idea is to start from this prime mover like you were describing. And once we've established that there is this prime mover, then we can look at what enables this prime mover to be the prime mover, this to be an independently existing thing. And once we've established the nature of this independently existing thing, then we can look to history to see if this thing interacted with humanity. But once we move to history, because of the very nature of history, then we move from being able to do rational, deductive arguments where, the conclusion follows cleanly from the premises and able to do it smoothly. We start getting into historical arguments, and at that point, it becomes a question of probability and likelihood. And at that point, it becomes less clean. But I think one can still make a case and be rational to arrive to the Catholic faith from that process. But I do agree that once you move away from the prime mover and what its nature is, then it starts getting a little bit messy.
If you're willing to remove the supernatural elements of any faith, I think you would probably have an easier time with the historicity of the New Testament than you would with prime mover in the terms of physical evidence, right? Because at least with biblical New Testament historicity, there is something you can at least substantially put your hand to, right? Not that that's necessarily true, but that weird juxtaposition is interesting to me. But real quick though, so is there a general platform that you can at least argue to me on face value as to why you can justify that belief in God is rational from a debate perspective?
Yeah. So the idea. Let me get my computer booted up. I had to start doing my debates or my lives on my phone because my computer wasn't strong enough to host TikTok Studio. But it's effectively 4 parts, and I do kind of go through the aspect of it. Like I said, on my TikTok and YouTube channel, I actually got the full thing on there. But so there's 4 parts to this argument. The first part of the argument demonstrates that something always had to exist. Hang on.
And are you able to prove that argument?
Yes, I believe so. I'm actually going to. I don't know if you're familiar with the group Unapologetic. They are it's a trio of individuals. One is very well known. His name's Justin. He's very well known in the scriptures. Then you have Dr. Blitz, who's a PhD physicist. And then you have allegedly Ian, who knows philosophy very, very well. And I'm actually a regular on Ian's show. And I've been on there on Unapologetic several times, and I'm planning on presenting this to them so that way they can show me which areas still need some work.
So before you continue, I do agree with you that I do not think non-existence is possible. I don't think it was ever possible. So continue.
Yeah. So the first one just demonstrates that something always had to exist. Premise 1, time is the measurement of change. Premise 2, in absolute nothing, which means that there's no beings, no change, no potential, no anything. There would be no change to measure. From the conclusion, therefore, if absolute nothing existed, time would not exist. Premise 3, a transition from non-existence to existence would be a change, therefore requiring time. Conclusion 2, therefore absolute nothing could never transition into something. premise 4, we observe beings existing. Therefore, there was never absolute nothing. Therefore, something has always existed. And then chain 2 gets to establishing that there must at least be one independent thing. And to define my terms a little bit, so you have two types of things that exist. You have things that are dependent and things that are independent. If something is dependent, it means it requires something else for it to exist. Whether that's something to put its pre-existing parts together, like the rearrangement of atoms and matter into, who we are, or it doesn't require anything else for it to exist. It just is. Premise 1: what has always existed must include either. What has always existed is either everything is dependent, everything is independent, or some mixture of the three. Those are the only three options available. We observe dependent things. So, as an example, you and I are dependent on the atoms being arranged in this particular structure.
Correct.
Therefore, it is not the case that everything is independent. Now, assuming that everything is dependent, then everything would include the sum total of all things. And the sum total of all things would also then require an external explanation if everything is dependent. Because that external explanation of the sum total of all things would itself be dependent, because again, remember, we're assuming that everything is dependent, it also would require further explanation. But then so too with that thing, and 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 so on, infinitely, which would create an infinite regress.
Can I ask you one question? I need you to stop. You made a comment, though, that nothingness would eventually determine that time as it would render time either, I think you said, useless or non-existent, correct?
If nothing existed, there would be no change to measure, and if there's no change to measure, then there is no time.
But here's the problem for you. You're going to argue, though, that God is outside of time. Doesn't that make the nature of God itself non-existent?
No, so it's not that non-exist or like time. If there's no time, it equals non-existence. It's if non-existence, therefore no time. But you can have no time and still have an existing thing.
But you haven't proven that first clause, though. You've set the parameters, but the things you're listing, because I'm actually jotting this down. The issue that I have is you are making a lot of assumptions that there must be a single isolated being or entity that must be the cause of the dependency.
Not quite yet. And I also hold to B theory, and I also hold that in a certain perspective, the universe always existed.
I see. That's surprising to me, because I actually accept that. I believe time, space, matter, and energy, these four elements, have always existed in one form or another. But how are you claiming, though, a point of creation?
There is no point of creation. So I'm a classical theist, and very similar to Thomas Aquinas.
Okay, so you're not actually the typical Christian in that aspect. It's going to be hard to debate you, since you're actually putting thought into this. So
there's a reason for the name. I'll put it that way.
Right. Okay. So from that vantage point, you and I do not disagree. If you're willing to concede that these elements could be eternal in and of themselves, I cannot disprove your argument that God is not irrational. So.
Yeah. So, and the other thing, as far as like that vicious infinite regress. So the point that I want to make is, at this point in the argument, I am not claiming, like I was saying, I'm not claiming at this point in the argument that the universe had a beginning. I am perfectly okay positing it is possible that the universe has an infinite, eternal past.
I don't want you to say it's plausible. I want to actually have your opinion. Do you think the universe is eternal? Is never not existed?
So there's.
I don't know. I don't want you to tell me what theories are out there. I want you to tell me what you believe.
So I do believe that the universe is eternal, but I do believe that the universe had a first moment. So it is possible in B theory for there to be a finite amount of time in that B theory while it's still eternal. There's a difference between it being eternal and it being an infinite.
Correct, but what you're really talking about is the expansion and regression of the universe, meaning the point of what we could consider this creation, as far as we know, could be the point at which this outside element created this next wave, but whatever preceded it wouldn't have to be part of that creator.
Not quite. So the understanding that I have as far as like creation is better understood as emanation. It's not like where God created from a first moment. The understanding that I have is that the act of creation is still ongoing. Like God is still creating this moment right now. He's going to create the next moment, and he created the last moment. Everything from the first moment to the last moment was created at the same time, eternally, and it's not a single moment of creation. God is still creating. He is still emanating his creation.
Is your creation argument here rooted in time, or for example, the universe we know is expanding, but the true nature of expansion is actually not expanding; it's actually being created on the on the far edges of itself, right? So, are you saying that that is what your creation is, or are you saying time itself is the creation that is continuous?
What I am saying is based on ontology. So the understand the point that I was getting here with this particular argument is, if everything is dependent, then that would include the sum total of all things, the universe itself. If the universe is dependent, then that means that the universe is dependent on something else. But if that thing is also dependent, like the claim is that everything is dependent, then that thing is also dependent on something else. And then we get to this vicious regress. So therefore, we now know that there has to be at least one independent thing, even if that independent thing is the universe. We don't know what that independent thing is yet. The argument at this point in time is just establishing that if we say that everything is dependent, it leads to a vicious regress, which means that we need at least one independent thing, even if that independent thing is the universe itself.
Okay, but how can you have this acceptance of this plausibility, but then become Christian in that aspect? Because then arguing
it's not yet done.
Right, but you're arguing that the independence could be the independent entity could be the universe itself, which is, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing. But to go from that next step to then say this independence then became man in the flesh, that's a massive jump, isn't it? Like you're jumping.
So that I do agree. If I was to go from this point to that, is a massive jump. This though isn't trying to get to God became man in the flesh. At this point, like you were saying, this is just trying to establish that there is some prime mover.
Right, but you in your headline, you yourself call yourself a Catholic Christian. But yes. What is the logic by which you got to that huge jump to make that assumption then?
That is looking at one. So the rest of the argument continues on to establish that what enables a thing to be independent is for it to be existent. So the way that the argument goes, because since we've established that there must at least be one independent being, an independent being requires nothing external for its existence. From the principle of sufficient reason, it is therefore sufficient for its own existence. And because it is sufficient for its own existence, it must have always existed.
But is this within the realm of your earlier argument of B theory?
Yes.
So here's my question, though. B theory is self-serving, though, isn't it? Because it's getting you to the end location that you want. But if you look at what I do believe it's called A theory.
So that's what I was getting at. So we have established the need for a independent thing. The next question is, because otherwise you're kind of doing a God of the gaps style of argument. Hey, we have established that there is a need for an independent thing. Let's just posit the universe in that spot and call it a day. But does the universe actually fit the criteria of what enables an independent thing to be independent? So that's what this next argument is exploring, is what enables an independent thing to be independent.
But
And
why
then we
couldn't
can
it be
see
a
if the
symbiotic?
universe fits that criteria.
Why couldn't the nature of existence be a symbiotic relationship between all elements that does not require an independent source?
So then that means that the independence becomes an emergent property. And you would then need to show that it is an emergent property. And
why would I have to show it, since that is what the nature of the reality that we're observing is? Like, I'm not adding anything.
Like, you're asserting that, but you haven't shown that.
Well, because it's like saying I don't have to prove, for example, that I'm speaking with you, at least from the ontological argument. But if I'm going to argue that everything in the universe is eternal and does not need an independent source of that contact, I wouldn't be wrong in the sense that that independent contact has never been proven. Your argument is it must exist based on these conditions that you believe are being presented with the universe, right? But you're basically creating your own end result based on the circumstances that you want to happen.
Not really, because, like I said, we've arrived at there must be at least one independent thing.
Where do you get that from without assumption? That's a desire claim. That's not really an evidentiary claim. That's a desire claim.
So where is the flaw in the argument of what has always existed must include where everything is dependent, everything is independent, or some mixture of both? Because we observe dependent things, we know that not everything is independent. If everything is dependent, this would include the sum total of all things. Thus, the sum total of all things would require an external explanation.
Because the dependency which exists does not necessarily facilitate the need for an independent actor, right? So because if everything has always been, why bring that next clause into the...
Well, no, that's what I'm saying is if everything is... So effectively what you're saying is because chain A in the link explains chain B, that's fine. Everything's been explained, but the question that I'm getting at is what explains the infinite chain?
Why does there need to be that explanation? Because you want that to be the independent source. I'm saying there's no your desire for...
If the infinite chain is independent, then that means that the claim everything is dependent is false. So you're still getting into there must at least be one independent thing, even if that's the infinite chain.
But why regress to the argument that itself requires the first argument to invalidate itself? Like, I don't understand why that position needs to be held unless you desire for there to be that prime mover.
Well, no, what I'm saying is so let me put it to you like this. What is the common mistake a lot of theists make when they present the Kalam cosmological argument? Everything needs a cause, right?
Sure, yes.
But then that means God needs a cause if that's the claim being made that everything needs a cause, right?
Agreed.
That's what I'm saying is happening here when someone says everything is dependent. If everything is dependent, that includes the full chain. Therefore, it is not the case that everything is dependent. There is at least one independent thing, even if that's the full chain.
Okay. I think I understand what you're saying, at least. I may not agree, but I think I'm starting to understand your logic behind it. Okay.
So then the next question is, now that we've established that there is at least one independent thing, we haven't identified what that independent thing is. So then the next step is to then look at what enables a thing to be independent. And once we've established that, then we can explore if a thing with that nature, or if the universe is that nature. If not, then we can know that it's something external to the universe. But if the universe does fit that criteria for what enables a thing to be independent, then we know that we've stopped at the universe and we're good.
Okay. I'm actually still thinking about your first flaws because I'm starting to get your rationale, so I'm trying to formulate a response to it. But you can also invite somebody else on because I don't want to just hog up the mic time, but I don't mind still discussing with you because I'm just formulating what's in my head.
Okay, yeah, if you want to come back up after you've thought about it a little bit, and like I said, I've got the video on my TikTok. I think it's actually my most recent one. I posted it yesterday. I go through the full thing and talk about it a little bit. That way, then you can at least get an idea on where I'm coming from.
One last thing, though, based on the characteristics that you've set for your argument, if you're going to use that for time, wouldn't that mean that using your logic, time is almost an illusion then? Because it is.
It seems to be that way for B theory, yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So you are okay. So that's where I think you and I are struggling, at least from that point, because I do believe time is linear, and you don't, and I get that. That's why I think I'm having a hard time understanding your parameters that you've set for the dependency argument. So, gotcha. But anyway, it was good talking to you, but I'll keep listening and chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a good one.
You too.
Let's see. All right, let's see. Doesn't look like. Let's see. I saw someone else was in. I don't know if. But I think Tang was next. Let's see. Or did he end up dropping out as well? But no, the reason I like talking with Ian is Ian honestly really knows their stuff. And it's something that like he pushes or they push me in areas that I wasn't expecting to be pushed, and I enjoy that challenge. Let's see. Let's see, I'm trying to bring people up, but it looks like they left. Xarkun, the argument that I was kind of going through, what is the kind of like updated version of the primary argument that I like to run? As I was saying though, you can find that on my TikTok. I've actually got it uploaded. Let's see if Benevolent Moose is still here. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, doesn't look like he's here. Let's see. Well, looks like everyone left while we were having that conversation. I'm not familiar with that particular apology. If it's the one that I'm thinking of where it's like one is about Jesus's genealogy through the line of Joseph and the other one is through Mary. I'm okay accepting that particular genealogy or that particular understanding. I haven't looked too deeply into it. So if it turns out to be completely wrong, I'm perfectly okay with that. Okay, yeah, I've got no idea what that apology is then. Let's see. But hope everyone's having a good day so far. But yeah, it doesn't look like I've got anyone in the guest box right now. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with ancient Hebrew culture. I do know that there's like adoption laws get a little bit weird, but let's see. Looks like YH is back. There we go.
I'm enjoying listening to your conversations. I heard you say that you've been studying this sort of thing since you were 3 years old.
6, but yes.
6 years old. Yeah, that's very impressive.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Yes, you were saying the other day something about you're trying to make St. Thomas Aquinas. You're trying to adapt him for the modern world or something like that?
More of like translates his language, because he uses Aristotelian language and Aristotelian metaphysics, and the philosophical language today has moved on from that. So like, for example, when he talks about something being contingent, the modern philosopher is going to hear the word contingent and think it means it's possible for it to be different. When what Thomas Aquinas was meaning was it is depending on something else. So, for example, while there's some parallel between the possible to be different and dependent on something else, there's a problem within the possible to be different language that's called the modal collapse argument, where if you have things that are contingent and then you introduce something that is necessary to that system, then everything collapses to being necessary because it's now impossible for those things to be different. Oh, looks like his connection was bad. But yeah, just to finish up what I was saying is that I'm just trying to make a little bit more clear what Aquinas was meaning. But we do have, looks like, Ashir in the guest box. Let's see. It looks like they left. Okay. But yeah, as it happens with all language, language has evolved and changed, and because Thomas Aquinas existed almost 800 years ago, the language is 800 years old, and I'm trying to see what I can do on translating it. And I do know that there's some people that have made some attempts, but there's almost like this, I don't know, this desire by a lot of people who want to keep the pristineness of Thomas Aquinas's language and don't want to update it. But I did see looks like we got Coop. Morning.
Hello, how's it going?
It's going all right. What brings you up here today?
Uh-oh. Is that Redefined I just seen join? Yeah, belief in God is rational. Now, I think this can't be true, but I want to see the way that you formulate it.
Yeah. So just to make sure that we're on the same page, when I say something is rational, I don't mean that it's true necessarily.
It's just logically sound, or
at least logically valid.
Right.
So I don't know if you were here when I was speaking with the other guy, but I was going through an argument that I literally just kind of like got in a somewhat finished state. I know it still needs some work, but it's at least, I feel like, structurally valid enough that I can at least publicly present it. It's divided into 4 parts. The first part is showing that there always had to be something existing. So time is
you're gonna give like a metaphysical argument. I thought you meant like like via circumstances or experience, believing in God would be rational. But if you're
I
gonna give
don't.
like a
Yeah.
metaphysical argument, I'm gonna have critiques.
Yeah. No. The thing. So let me ask you this then: do you think that if an argument is sound, then the conclusion is true?
I mean, I would just say like any argument that's like, well, you could have like like a logically formal argument,
Hmm.
and the conclusion can not necessarily be true.
So
I don't
that
think.
it's valid.
Right.
So if the argument is sound, does that mean that the conclusion is true?
I think it's possible. Maybe I don't know. I might misspoke.
So the laws of logic. So to clarify, then, a valid argument is where the conclusion falls from the premises. It doesn't mean that
Right.
the premises are true or that the conclusion is true. It just means that
Right.
no fallacies have been committed, and it is a formally valid structure.
Yeah. Sure.
A sound argument is when the premises are true. And because the premises are true, and the conclusion of a valid argument follows from the premises, we know that the conclusion must be true. So all sound arguments have true conclusions.
Okay. Yeah.
A valid argument is where it, at the very end of the day, if as long as you at least accept the premises, you must accept the conclusion. But we
Right.
do
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
know if the conclusion is true or not, as well as a sound argument.
Okay. Yeah. That.
So the first one the first argument that just establishes that there always had to be something existing. So time is the measurement of change, and if there was absolutely nothing, there would be no change to measure. So if absolute nothing existed, that would also mean that there would be no time to measure this change, because there would be no change to measure. A transition from non-existence to existence would be a change, but that can't happen in a timeless state, because you can't have change in a timeless state. Therefore, absolute nothing could never transition into something, meaning if absolute nothing was the case, it always would be absolute nothing. However, we observe existing things, therefore we can know that there was never absolute nothing, thus something has always existed.
Dude, that sounds like one of my arguments. I'm an atheist.
Yeah, so the thing is like I know that like allegedly Ian uses a form of this argument a lot as well, and the thing is that they and I agree on like something always existed, and they and I also agree that in a sense the universe also always existed. I disagree on the infinite past model that they subscribe to, but I also acknowledge that it's a valid position and a rational position to hold. The other argument that I go into is that there must be at least one independent thing. So now that we've established, that there will
I see where this is going.
So then once we know that something always had to exist, we then explore the three possibilities. Either everything is dependent, which means it relies on something else in order for it to exist. Everything is independent, or there's a mixture of the two. Do you agree that those are the only three possible criteria?
Criteria for things to exist?
No, as in like the state of reality. Like, because reality exists, and there's two types of things that could exist: things that are dependent on something else, things that are independent of other things, or
Sure. Yeah.
Because those are the only two things, there's only three possible ways for the universe to be: either everything is one, everything is the other, or there's a mixture of the two.
Now, yeah. Now, would you say like the universe in totality, like an aggregate whole, would be independent?
at this point in the argument, that is a possibility that's still available even at the end of this argument. The whole purpose of this is showing that if one wants to claim that everything is dependent, that includes the totality of the universe. And if the totality of the universe requires something else that it's dependent on, then that creates this vicious infinite regress. Therefore, there must be some mixture of things.
I like how you said vicious.
Well, that's the modern terminology nowadays. Like, I can't just say infinite regress, because people equate the infinite eternal past as a form of infinite regress, but that's a benign infinite regress. So the proper terminology nowadays is vicious infinite regress.
Yeah, you're just piquing my interest. That's all.
But yeah, so if you're saying, hey, what if the universe is the totality of all things is this independent thing? That's fine at this point in the argument, because all that's needed for my second argument is just to establish that of the three possibilities, everything is independent, everything is dependent, or there's some mixture of the two. We can agree that everything is independent is false because we see things that are dependent. And then the vicious infinite regress occurs if we try to claim that everything is dependent. So even if the universe is the independent thing, that satisfies the criteria for the third option. There are some dependent things and some independent.
I'll grant the criteria.
Okay.
For
So
now.
if you're fine establishing that, yes, there is some, at least one independent thing, I'm going to go ahead and move past the second argument because it sounds like we agree. The next argument is just exploring what enables a thing to be an independent thing.
So what do you mean by enables? Like dictates?
It's more of like you are what you are because of the particular arrangements of the atoms that you have. That enables.
Is that like an identity, or is that like?
So it's trying to establish the identity of the independent thing by exploring what makes an independent thing be independent.
So I understand that. It's okay, sure, fine, yeah, no. I feel like what I was gonna say is irrelevant.
Okay. So premise one, an independent thing requires nothing external for its existence. This comes from the definition. Therefore, it is sufficient for its own existence. From the principle of sufficient reason, this means it always existed. For an independent thing, the claim it does not exist must be a contradiction. Now, I do want to establish something. I'm being very technical when I'm using the term contradiction. When I say the door is open, but it's actually closed, that's not a contradiction. That is contrary evidence. A contradiction is when you say A is not A, where you are negating the identity of a thing. So the true contradiction would be if I was to say the door is not a door.
Okay, yeah. You can keep going.
So in order for that negation, it does not exist, to be a contradiction, its existence must be identical to its identity.
Hold on. So are you saying like its identity is propositional?
No, I'm saying its identity is its own existence. So, like, for example, you and I have an identity of human being. Existence doesn't add anything onto that identity, it just actualizes that identity. But if we say this independent thing does not exist, and when we say independent thing A does not exist, in order for that to be a contradiction, the independent thing A and does not exist, not A, have to be the same. So independent thing is not independent thing. Existence is not existence.
And you're saying there has to be like You're saying that's like a heteronymous thing? I don't.
No, I'm saying so a contradiction is when you say A is not A.
Yeah, I understand that. It's that I feel like you're asking like, how do we? What enforces that parameter? I guess
The
is
law
that
of
what you're?
non-contradiction.
Yeah,
So if the
I'm
law of
not.
non-contradiction isn't, it's one of the self-evident axioms of
Yeah,
logic.
that's what I was at. Like, I don't think it's propositional. So when I don't, unless I like misunderstood you when you said that like something like the identity of something like it can be its negation and stuff like that, or
Yeah.
there's
So the law of non-contradiction states that something can't be both itself and not itself. You can't
right,
violate that. So if I say the door is not a door, that violates the law of non-contradiction.
right,
If
yeah,
if I say that I am a human being and I am not a human being, that is a contradiction. If I say I don't exist, that's not a contradiction for myself. That's just contrary to reality. There's a difference between something being a contradiction and being contrary.
right, yeah,
So when we say, because the independent thing always existed, there's a terminology in math and even logic called a necessary truth. And a
right,
necessary truth is different from a contingent truth. So the contingent truth would be the door is open. It is dependent on the state of affairs actually being that case. And if the state of affairs is not actually the case, we don't claim that's a contradiction. That's contrary to the state of affairs. Versus this bachelor is married. That is a contradiction. You don't need to look at an external state of affairs. So because an independent thing is sufficient for its own existence, to claim it does not exist would be a contradiction, because now we are violating its own identity, because its own identity is sufficient for its own existence from the law of sufficient reason. In order for the negation, independent thing does not exist, to be a contradiction, that means the phrase does not exist, or I'm sorry, not does not exist. The phrase exist, because that's what's being negated,
right.
must be identical to the identity of the independent thing. Therefore, the independent thing is existence.
Okay,
This is what I understand to be God, is the independent existence that is just pure existence. Therefore, the question of well, could it be the universe itself? Because the universe is not identical to existence. It is comprised of existing things that have their own separate identity that are actualized as existence. That means that the universe itself does not fit the identity of this independent thing, because what makes the independent thing be the independent thing is its identity is its own existence.
So you're fine with saying that existence, like just being simplicator, is that independent thing?
Yep.
But that doesn't entail like agency.
That's not the point that this argument is concerned yet. As far as so the question of whether this independent thing has a mind is triune, became incarnate, that is much, 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 much further down. At this point in time, all I'm concerned with is establishing that there is an independent thing that is the grounding and source of everything else that exists.
Oh, I don't like that grounding word, but I'm fine with saying existence, or like existing is that can be an independent thing, sure, but I think there's going to be a downhill battle after that for you.
I mean, I've got a project that I'm working on where I think I'm able to show not necessarily that the Catholic Church absolutely is the true church, where
Well, I
everyone.
wouldn't even say it would just be to like where the leap to theism, because
Yeah.
right now it could be it's like a bit synonymous with like some type of pantheism or atheism or
Yeah, and that's fine. Like that's the next step in the project that I'm working on. But I do encounter a lot of people who will argue like, "Hey, there's brute contingencies," which I disagree with. There's people who will say, "Oh, the universe itself is this independent thing," which I disagree with. So I'm trying to establish at this point in time simply the fact that no, it's not a brute contingency. It's a necessary independent thing that is its own sufficient reason for existing, and it's not the universe.
yeah. I mean, it just seems like a lot of like metaphysical baggage that's added. Not like within the premises themselves, but like like the whole like with their whole argument. It's like it's very robust. But like I have no problem affirming that position.
Thank you.
So like do you run like a certain argument for Christianity or
The best that I could like it, and it's still a work in progress, but effectively to give like the Cliff Notes version of it. So we've established this independent being is existence itself. When we look at the different religions throughout history, we don't see this worship of existence itself, except in maybe a few possible candidates. And one of them is the Jewish faith. The understanding of the Jewish faith when God reveals his name is he's not revealing, hey, like, my name is Catholic Thinker. No, he's revealing his identity, what he is. Well, what does he reveal to Moses? I am that I am. I am is his name, is his identity. I am is the first person participle of the verb being, to be. So there, God is revealing himself to Moses as being. So then the next question is, well, is this something that the Jewish people could have reasoned philosophically on their own? Well, no, based on manuscripts that we have, the absolute, or at least I don't think it's likely, the absolute latest that particular phrase could have been written within the text, like based on academic biblical scholarship, who deny that Moses was the author of the text. I have no problem affirming that. State that it was around the Babylonian exile, which occurred, I want to say like 200 to 300 years. You know, somewhere between I forget the exact time frame, but somewhere between 1 to 2.
I know what you're referencing.
200 years before the birth of Plato and Aristotle. And Plato and Aristotle were one of the first people to start exploring seriously this idea of being. Aristotle described it as thought thinking itself. He still didn't quite get to the idea of being whose identity is its own existence. And it wasn't until you got to Moses Maimonides and even Thomas Aquinas to finally put a neat little bow on this idea of being whose identity is its existence. So you've got almost like 1500 years between when it was finally formalized in a part of philosophical conversation to the point where it's almost second nature, to when it was first written about. And that, to me, almost seems anachronistic, where it seems plausible, since we have established such a being does exist, that this being did reveal itself in some way to the Jewish people. And if this being did reveal itself to the Jewish people, then what was being revealed to them? And then from there, we continue on looking at the history of the Jewish people, and we see these prophets being sent to speak on behalf of this being. And there's a particular one by the name of Jesus who shows up and claims more than just a prophet, but that he is the same being that spoke through the prophets. And one of the signs that was promised by this being to the Jewish people was that signs and wonders would accompany these prophets to show that he approved their message. And many of these prophets raised people from the dead, but none of them raised themselves from the dead. So then we have that Jesus was crucified and died under Pontius Pilate. And then we explore the events of the resurrection to see if it's plausible to hold that he resurrected. So moving from like the revelation of the divine name to the Jewish people to the resurrection and things like that, that's where we get into where I call it plausible arguments, where you can still hold to it for rational reasons, but it's not going to be as robust or solid as the argument that I presented to you as to there being this being whose identity is its own existence.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, there's going to be some people that come along eventually that you explain your argument to, they're going to poke holes in the independent stuff.
I'm already planning on presenting the argument that I presented to you to Unapologetic on Sunday if I'm able to. I've been on their show several times and I trust their insights, and I know that there's probably holes and gaps that I'm unaware of, and I'm trying to get this as tight as I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, I fuck with it a little bit. I've heard some of it before, from Christians and from pantheists, and Deathless Light. I don't know. I'm just playing. But yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
Yep, you too.
Let's see. Looks like we've got Brent in the guest box. Welcome up.
What's up, man?
How's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty good. I was listening to your whole conversation there, and it's you can't put the dots together. You're talking about the creation of the universe and how it acts, and you're trying to insert your God into it, and there's just no way to get that dot to dot to connect.
So the argument as I have presented it, I am not claiming that it's the Christian God. I am merely saying that we have arrived at there is an independent thing that exists whose identity is its own existence.
Okay, so you're making an atheist claim or argument right there. There might be something out there that could have started the universe. We don't know what it is, but how do you get to your God?
So as I was explaining at the tail end, that's something that I'm still working on and getting through. But as far as like this particular argument, where it's just talking about the ultimate grounding of reality, which is what most philosophers mean by the term God, is that which is the ultimate grounding of all reality. That's what this argument is attempting to show, is that there is this ultimate grounding of all reality whose identity is its own existence. I'm not claiming that this argument is going to get anyone to Christianity, Catholicism, or anything like that.
You kind of have to see how that own thinking is flawed, though. Because you have no clue. We have no clue on what started the universe, or even where that entity that started the universe came from.
So that's missing 2 points that I did address early on. I don't know if you were here for that. One, I have no problem in this argument where the universe itself is infinite, where it has an infinite past, no beginning, no end. This argument does not require the universe to have a beginning. And then two, to say, well, where did God come from? That contradicts the statement of independent thing requires nothing external for its existence. It is therefore sufficient for its own existence. And if it's sufficient for its own existence, that means it must always exist. It didn't come from something. If it came from something, that makes it a dependent thing, which contradicts the very definition of independence.
And we have no clue if that entity is a dependent on another factor.
Actually,
we don't know.
Actually, we can know that through logic and reason, because if everything is dependent, then, like you were saying, so we've got this extra, we've got the entirety of everything that exists, and if that's dependent on something, then we've got to add something that is dependent on, even if we don't know what it is. We've got a variable there. We've got x. But if x is also dependent, then we need y. But if y is dependent, then we need z. And if z is dependent, and so on, so forth, and so on, so forth. And that creates a vicious infinite regress.
Well, that's where the logic comes in. If there's something and everything needed something to create it, and then you get to entity A, then obviously the logic there is, well, not everything need to be created.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So it is a vicious cycle, and that's logical.
Well, no. I'm saying if you claim that everything is dependent, and you get to A, you need something before A in order for that claim to remain consistent. But that creates that vicious regress, which we know can't be the case. So therefore, we know for a fact that there must be at least one thing that is not dependent on something else. And because we know that there is one thing that is not dependent on something else, the next question is, what is the identity of this thing that's not dependent on something else?
No, we can't. We can't agree on that. We don't know for sure if there is an independent entity out there that was always to be.
So then so let me ask you this. Do you know the difference between a valid and a sound argument?
Yeah. A valid argument is something you can reproduce. It's something you can logically get to.
No. A valid argument is an argument whose conclusions follow from the premises, which basically means that no fallacies were committed. If the premises are true in a valid argument, then the conclusion is true. A sound argument is any valid argument with true premises, meaning if you have a sound argument, you know that the conclusion is true. If an argument is valid and you agree with all of the premises, even if you don't know the conclusion is true, in order to be rational and logically consistent, you ought to accept the conclusion. Otherwise, you are being illogical. So then the question is, for the argument on there needing to be at least one independent thing, what fallacy was committed, or what premise do you disagree with?
Well, for logically, we see a pattern that everything is dependent on something else. Mm-hmm. Now, if you take that into finding a object or entity that is not dependent on something else, that contradicts the previous term.
No,
not everything is dependent on something.
And I agree that it is not the case that everything is dependent on something. That's the point of the argument, to show that there must be at least one thing that is independent. Do you disagree with that conclusion?
I do.
Okay. So do you think that everything is independent?
I believe it's both. I believe there's stuff out there that's dependent and independent.
That's exactly what I said. And I asked if you agreed with that, and you said no.
I disagree that they're. Oh man, trying to find my train of thought. Sorry.
I said, so let me rewind a bit then. Do you agree that there is a mixture of dependent and independent things such that there must be at least one independent thing, even if there's more?
That doesn't depend on anything else
Correct.
to exist.
Correct. That's what independent means.
In that case, no. I don't believe there is anything that's independent on its own.
Okay. So you believe then that
There's no way we can.
So you believe that
There's no way
everything
we
is
can prove
dependent.
that there is.
So you believe that everything is dependent.
I think everything is dependent on something else.
Okay. So two things. What is your justification for saying that everything is dependent?
Everything we see in the universe is dependent on something else.
That is
Everything.
a black swan fallacy and an argument from ignorance.
I mean, what in the observable universe can you see that is independent of something else?
It doesn't matter. Like
Everything.
for a long time, we only observed white swans. And if someone came up and said black swans exist, well, everything we've ever seen was a white swan, so you're wrong. Well, we discovered black swan. Hence the name black swan fallacy. Just because we haven't observed something doesn't mean that it's not the case. So to appeal to the fact that all we've seen is dependency is a black swan fallacy. You would need to show that it's impossible for there to be independency.
But then the other way is the same.
So that's what I was showing. That's what I was showing, where you were agreeing that it becomes a vicious cycle where if you have only dependent things, then there's another dependent thing, another dependent thing, another dependent thing, and until it becomes a vicious infinite regress. And you agreed that it's a vicious cycle, so there needs to be some terminating factor where it's not dependent on something else.
I don't believe so.
So then what you need to do...
Independent factor is just, in itself is a fallacy until proven that exists.
So...
Because like I said, everything we observe in the universe...
So do you know... So, like I was saying, if the premises are true, and there is no fallacy, then we get to a conclusion we know to be true. So do you agree that something can be dependent, that it's possible for something to be dependent, that it's possible for something to be independent? I'm not asking if they actually exist, I'm asking if it's possible.
If it's possible for something to exist without
dependency.
Without dependency. Is it possible?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to say no.
Okay. So then your claim is that everything is dependent.
I would say it's more than just a claim. I mean, we have evidence. We've seen stuff. We've seen more of the universe. Yeah. Everything that exists now was because of something else. And then that was because of something else. And then that was because of something else.
So how do you explain quantum particles popping in that didn't have something else for them to pop in?
Well, that's quantum physics.
That's still part of the universe.
That's not even completely known.
That's still part of the universe.
Not even the top ranked scientists fully understand quantum physics.
But
they
it's
have
still
a good idea on it, there might be something we're missing. That's science. We're always missing something that doesn't connect. It doesn't mean that we just
then
insert
you can't claim then
our
that everything we've seen is dependent on something else, because we have observed things that appear to not be dependent on something else.
I think logically we can insert the fact that everything we known and observed,
That's still
we
a
can
black swan
logically.
fallacy.
I mean, God itself is a black swan fallacy.
Where is the fallacy in the argument that I have presented?
Logically, it's sound. You're absolutely right. We don't know.
Then that means if it so to clarify your position, because I don't think you mean what you had just said. If you say that my argument is sound, that means that the conclusion is true. I think you meant to say it's valid, which means that
There you go. Valid.
that there's no errors in the thinking, and if the premises are true, then the conclusion does follow. You're just not sure if you want to attribute a particular premise as true currently.
That's correct.
Okay.
Your way of thinking can be concluded to that. I just think we don't know everything, right? It's impossible to know exactly.
But that doesn't mean we can't be have confidence in conclusions, even in things that we don't have full knowledge of. Like, I don't have full knowledge of mathematics. Like, I barely passed algebra, so trying to get into trigonometry, oh boy. But I know that 2 + 2 = 4.
That was me too, yeah.
So just because we can't know everything doesn't mean we can't be certain about some things.
We can have hypothesis on things. That's where science comes in and works the theories.
For empirical data, and what we are exploring is not something that is empirical. Like, science can't help us determine whether whether to pull the lever on the trolley or not. Like, that's not something that science can help us in. So science itself has limitations, but what logic is attempting to do is take statements that we know or are pretty certain are true, and then using those statements in the logical structure, we can then arrive at conclusions that follow from those statements.
Well, when you try to use logic and science together, science is going to tell you if your logic is actually sound. Right? It's
not necessarily.
You can think whatever you want that makes sense in your brain. Hell, back in the early 1920s, when vehicles were starting to go, scientists back then said, oh, if we go over 55 miles an hour, you will die. Right? You ever heard that?
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I haven't heard that, but that's not a logical claim. That's the scientific claim that you said would make the argument sound, but that's not.
Science updates and does its research, and yeah, they try to get as close to possible.
But what I was getting at is, science isn't what makes an argument sound. Science might help support a particular premise to show that a premise is true, but the science isn't what makes an argument sound. What makes an argument sound is the premises being true or not. So, like, for example, we can come to true knowledge without requiring science if we know that a particular statement is true. So, like, if I know for a fact that bachelors are unmarried men, and I know that Jack is an unmarried man, then I know that Jack is a bachelor. So from there, no science was involved, but I know that the conclusion is true.
I'll bring up one for you.
Okay.
Grass is green.
Mhm.
Is that true?
I mean, there's different colored grasses out there, but
We'll
In
take
this
the
situation-
lawn. Your lawn.
oh, my lawn's dead.
Oh God, I know mine is too.
But no, I get what you're saying. Is like, so we have the premise: grass is green.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you would say that's true, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually absorbs all light except for green.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, scientifically, grass is every color except for green.
So what you're doing there is what's called an equivocation. So when you were saying grass is green, the phrase in our common everyday language is grass appears to us as green. And then you were pointing out
But-
that grass appears as green, but it's not actually green. So that's an equivocation fallacy where you were using the terminology of the first statement, grass is green, which we use as shorthand to mean grass appears to us as green, to then equivocate to grass actually is green.
But it goes against your other premise. Yeah, there's some things we created. Bachelors, married people. That's something we created.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that you're doing an equivocation fallacy by using similar terms in similar languages.
I'm
But
using
confuse it.
what we think is logical. Yes, we see grass is green, the tree leaves are green.
Mhm.
Scientifically, we are wrong. Because everything we see that has color
the
is
grass
everything but that color.
the grass being green is a subjective experience. So we can't be wrong about our own subjective experience. So when you're saying grass is
Any
green-
color you see,
Mhm.
I'm looking at a red house.
yeah,
Scientifically, that
it's
house
all the
is
colors
every
except red.
color except for red.
Yeah,
So I don't worry about the green grass. Any color you see is everything but that color.
right. I
So
understand.
what we logically see and know
That's not how logic works.
how's that not what logic?
So what logic
You would say
what logic is, it is a language system to combine different premises to then arrive at new information. So your first statement of the house is red, the proper structure for that in a logical system is the house has the subjective appearance of red to the observing individual. From there, you point out, hey, science says the house absorbs all colors except for red. That's why it appears red to us. But that's what that first statement is saying. The house is red statement is shorthand for that longer logical structure of the house has the appearance of red to the observer.
yes.
So what logic is you're taking a premise, combining it with other premises, and seeing what pops out. You wouldn't say that 2 + 2 = 4 is wrong. You would say that 2 is wrong if and only if the object you're talking about is 3. logic is not a truth claiming thing. It's a system like science. Science has a method to help lead us to truth, and logic is a language tool we use to help us get abstract stuff to truth. Science is for the material, logic is for the immaterial.
Right. What we think is logical,
We can make
science can tell us it's not.
Well, no, we can make logical errors, and other logicians will come in to fix those errors. Just like science can think something is true, and then other scientists come in and correct that mistake. Science and logic are operating in two different fields. It's like you wouldn't have a lawyer trying to help a doctor. Like it's two different fields, even if they both are highly educated individuals.
I don't know where to go from here.
I mean, hey, I did enjoy the conversation for what it's worth.
All right. I did too.
You have a good one, Brent.
You're a cool guy. I like
Thanks,
talking to
you
you.
too.
How do I exit?
See. All right. Let's see. Saw Kant in the comments.
Yes, hello. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. How about yourself? I thought it was ironic. Like I saw you in the comments right as I was about to bring up something that Kant said.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so I just wanted to know if you think that God is the first cause of the universe.
Not in the sense of like a efficient cause chain, like we tend to think of like causal chains. The way that I understand like cause is a very classical understanding of cause. That's not very intuitive to a lot of people. So for example, the example I like to use is you have a triangle and you have its three sides. Its three sides cause the three angles to equal up to 180 degrees. Well, we don't really call that a cause and effect in modern language, modern philosophical language, but that's the kind of cause that God is, in my understanding, that God is the reason for the universe to be, even if it's not efficient causation.
Okay, so God is like the sustaining cause. So, but God is part of the causal system. He's not outside of it for the physical universe.
That sounds accurate.
Yeah, because if you take it that God is the efficient cause, then God would be causally prior to the first moment in time, which would mean that he's temporally prior to time.
Yeah, which
So
I don't agree with.
you think God is logically prior to time?
Ontologically prior, in the sense of like where time is dependent on things changing, and things changing is dependent on them existing, and God is what they are dependent on, is the way that I would describe it.
You define time in terms of change.
Yeah.
And what is change?
Change is difference between two different states of being.
So change is a relation between moments?
Yeah.
So you define time in terms of change, and you define change in terms of moments in time.
That's
viciously circular, sir. That's your first blunder. Viciously circular is a blunder. It's okay. Just accept the fact that you blundered, sir. We can move on. That's a blunder.
It wasn't that I said moments in time. Moments of being is not the same as moments of time.
Oh, okay. So change is not going to be dependent on moments in time?
Time is like you wouldn't say that a ruler is measures space, but the space itself is not dependent on the ruler.
Yeah, that's not analogous here, because again, we're talking about tensed propositions when we're talking about moments in time. So my view that I want to maintain, excuse me, sir, I want to maintain that time is distinct from moments in time. See, your view is that moments in time are going to be identical to time, because what are moments? They're just going to be change. Well, change is going to be defined in terms of time. So you have a problem with vicious circularity on your view. How do you solve this, sir?
So, as I was trying to explain, for things existing. It exists in one state. Then it exists in a different state. That change is what we call time. Now, are you an A theory or a B theory of time?
So what I'm talking about actually is the philosophy of time. I'm not talking about A and B theory, because A and B theory captures the relation between moments in time, but it actually doesn't deal with whether or not temporal propositions are tensed or tenseless.
Yeah, so the thing is I'm a B theorist where all moments of time are equally real. So
Yeah.
you're looking at a roadmap essentially and seeing the differences on that roadmap, and time is the measurement of that.
Yeah, but that doesn't actually tell you whether or not like temporal propositions are tensed on your view.
I don't think they are.
Okay, so
They're
if all
like when we
so if
talk,
all temporal propositions are tenseless, then they're not going to be analytically identical to time itself. So you maintain a relational account of time. You're not a substantival theorist. You don't think that time is distinct from moments in time, which is exactly my point. So if you don't take it that time is distinct from moments in time because all temporal propositions are tenseless and therefore they're not analytically identical to time itself, then you would have to have a problem where there's this vicious circularity in your view.
so the thing is that that same argument applies to space in my understanding of time. So if you want to say that space is circular because we use measurements to measure space, which is a measurement of space, then you're running into that same argument for space. Time and space are different measurements on the same grid. So if it's circular for time, it's circular for space as well.
Yeah,
So
I
if
disagree
that's the
with
goal
that
that you
account
want to
because on my
find,
view, time
go
and
for it.
space are just going to be different forms of the principle of sufficient reason. Because time and space are just going to be laws that govern the world of appearance, since I'm a Kantian. But just to be clear
And
about
like I was saying, when I was trying to say that time, like you can't have tense statements of time, but it can appear as tense. When I was trying to explain that it's about appearances, you cut me off, trying to catch me on this gotcha moment. So if you're not here to be respectful and to have a good faith conversation,
Yeah, I'm
then-
here for good faith linear conversations.
then
Just to be
no,
clear
you're
about
not.
this, though, you maintain the view that there are no tense propositions. So all temporal propositions are tenseless, since you're a B theorist.
Kant. Coming up here, rattling off a bunch of philosophical jargon at rapid speed is not good faith.
Yes, sir. I'm not interested in the meta. I want to engage in a good faith linear conversation that's substantive.
So I am telling you what the meta is because I am describing the meta rules for the conversation to be up here as a guest. If you
So
don't
do you
want to
think an
follow
actual
those-
infinite causal series is possible?
if you don't want to follow those rules, then I'm going to drop you from the live. So do you want to follow the rules? Because the reason why this is a meta conversation is because so far you have decided to ignore those rules. And if you continue to decide to ignore those rules, then we're not going to have a conversation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
Yes, sir. Yeah, so do you think that an infinite causal series is possible?
yeah.
An actual infinite?
Yeah, an actual infinite is possible.
Yeah. Do you think that the relation between each cause in the chain and effect is going to be counterfactual, or no?
Can you elaborate on that?
Do you know what a counterfactual conditional is?
I'm familiar with it, but I'm wondering how you're understanding it and how you're using it.
Do you know what counterfactual dependency is, good sir?
Not sure. Like I've heard the phrase, but wasn't something that was a part of my studies in depth. So a refresher would be appreciated.
Yeah, in this case, we're just going to be appealing to a counterfactual dependency that's satisfied by a given explanation where the explanans is of a different class than the explanandum. So the counterfactual dependency would say that, for any possible world X, there's a being Y such that if Y did.
So Kant, you were doing the same thing again where you were just saying a bunch of jargon trying to, I don't know, show off your ego. So I'm dropping you from the live.
You're a brain dead retard.
Well, I knew it was a matter of time before we got a Phil Bro up. Let's see, SNS. Doesn't look like SNS is up. All right. All right. So, in regards for some of the people in the chat, the thing with what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to use the language in a way that people who aren't familiar with it can understand. And, you know, the term counterfactual, I've heard the term and I've seen people use it once or twice, but I'm still not familiar with it. And he, instead of using it in layman's terms where someone who isn't familiar with it could understand, decided to use jargon that people couldn't use it. So, and I said I was familiar with the term. So, you know, if you want to come up and be in bad faith, like, I'm sorry, like, I'm not here for a bad faith conversation. And I've seen a bunch of people like him on people like Unapologetic and Allegedly Ian show, and I'm not interested in having conversations like that. Hey, Webster.
Yeah, I skull fucked you in the conversation. You don't know anything about counterfactual theories of causality, slow boy. You got conceptually outpaced. You're conceptually cucked.
So it's going to be one of those days as we finish up here. Okay. No, counterfactual itself is not jargon. When I asked to explain counterfactual, he used counterfactual itself and then used a bunch of other technical terminology. Now, if he had said a counterfactual is where you say, if A is true, then, you know, gave an example of what a counterfactual is, then that would have been fine. I would have been okay with that, but not where you are using technical terminology. Like if I was to say, hey, so the thing about predestination is that it's about sufficient grace and efficacious grace. And if you don't know what efficacious grace is, then you need to understand that efficacious grace is about the relationship of God's omniscience and omnipotent act enforcing his grace onto an individual. Like, if you're not familiar with the formal definition and the terminology, that's not going to help anyone. So I'm not interested in trying to show off who knows more technical jargon. You know, that's the issue. A formal definition is only clear to those who are familiar with the form. But we did have some good conversations. I'm just sad that it ended on this note. And if it's so clear, maybe provide it in the comments. I've actually have talked to Ogar in Discord multiple times. He and I are in Allegedly Ian's Discord. We did butt heads quite a bit because our approaches to conversations are very, very different. But we were able to get it worked out and are good friends at this point. He's actually invited me up to help explain a couple of different things to some of his theistic viewers. That way then it's not a case of just like, oh, you're just wrong because the atheist says it's wrong. Well, thank you, Abby. That's the hope, is I'm hoping to have a conversation with people to help them explore different perspectives that they weren't previously aware of. I'm not here to try to convince anyone, and I'm not here to really honestly have a debate. I'm just trying to have a conversation. But let's see. Yeah, so yeah, like if this was the definition of a counterfactual that was given, this is kind of what I was looking for. A counterfactual is a what-if statement or scenario that explores what might have happened if events had taken a different turn contrary to what actually occurred. You know, something along that. That's not technical jargon. Like, provide something that's simple and easy to understand, so then we can have a good faith conversation. No, he was using a lot more different technical jargon. He did not say a statement or scenario that explores what might have happened if events were different. I've got it on the recording where he said a lot more than just that. But let's see, it looks like we got. Oh. Hey, Abby.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. What brings you up?
So two things I had a question about. The first, I heard you were talking about you've been on Unapologetic, I believe.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if I'm sure you've had this discussion. I just haven't heard it. What would be your critique? Because yeah, I heard you were talking about like the idea of a God. You're not necessarily taking it all the way to leap to specifically the Christian God, but
Yeah, I'm happy answering questions about like Christian dogma. I'm not necessarily happy
sure.
that they're rational necessarily.
Right.
But I'm happy answering questions on that.
Well, that's okay because it's not really to that step yet. But I was gonna see if you're okay with for this conversation using like creator. Like, do you think there was a creator?
Yeah. And just to kind of like explain a little bit like why I was trying to use the term emanation earlier is a lot of times in this conversation, creation is usually used to designate a moment of not creating to creating. But as far as like that relationship of there being a God that is the source, aka creating, that's still proper to use, even if it's not technically accurate. So I'm fine with the term creator God.
Okay.
As long as
Well, it actually that in of itself kind of helps me clarify because I was wondering if the that argument I'm not sure what he deems or what he calls it. I don't know if it's his originally, but the argument of the creation of needing time. But you're saying, is your argument that, because I heard you say earlier, you do think the universe is eternal. Was that correct?
Like
Okay.
The argument that I present isn't requiring on the universe having a beginning. It works just fine in either hypothetical situation.
Okay, so when you're talking about an emergent, that's what you're referring to, that there is an independent source that has this emergent property that create that or that I guess I don't know creates the right word, but well I guess creates the universe. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what would be your critique if you were to say that that independent source? I don't necessarily think that there's an independent source on my worldview, but that these dependent sources have that emergent property as well, where through them emerges an eternal universe. Is there a critique you can see within that?
Yeah, so at that point in time, the argument as I presented and what we usually spend a lot of time on, because I think people get hung up on what I'm talking about for what I call the trilemma of either everything is dependent, everything is independent, or there's some mixture of the two. At that point in time in that argument, independence as an emergent property is possible and plausible. Like that hasn't been explored and eliminated as of yet. So if someone is perfectly fine stopping there, that's still a rational stopping point. The next step that I like to go to, though, is then exploring, well, what enables something to be independent? And the way that I approach it is, well, if something is independent, then that means that are you familiar with the principle of I think it's the principle of efficient reason, where if A is present and is sufficient for B, then everywhere that A is present, B is present.
Yeah, not super familiar, but I can follow that.
Okay. So if something is independent, then that means it's its own sufficient reason for existing. So everywhere that A is. And because it's its own sufficient reason, just like it would be violating the laws of logic to say that if A is sufficient for B and A is present but no B,
right? Yeah,
it would be a contradiction to say that for this independent thing to not exist.
Would an example of this, to kind of strawman you a bit, would an example of this be, well, not strawman, I guess steelman your argument. If so, like with time or matter, like the way I can view it is for time to exist, you need a progression of states. So you need the other variable, which I could consider this case matter.
Yeah.
For matter to exist, it's going to have movement, meaning it needs time to exist. So would that be an example of this?
Kind of, yeah. Whereas if you have the one, you must have the other.
Right.
I don't know.
That's like just an example I could think of.
I don't know if it requires that interdependency. I think it can be a one-way dependency, but yeah, like that. I think that's a fair example of the sufficient reason.
So in that case, then you wouldn't say that, like, okay, say this is what I'm going with the existence of the universe, how there's these variables. I don't necessarily know if you consider them independent. Then maybe time. Maybe the example you just gave, you could say that the way the direction of that relation goes is time being present, therefore the progression of states through matter. But either way you look at it, can you not say that these aren't necessarily independent, but through those dependent variables, there's the emergence of the universe? Would the universe in that case be the independent, or is it possible to have that argument and there's really not an independent, it's all dependent, and it's just you're okay with infinite regression through that?
So I am not okay with infinite regression. In fact, that's like part of the argument is like, no, you can't have an infinite regression. You can have.
And after that, if you don't mind, I kind of want to hear your critique of infinite regression.
Yeah. So now you can have infinite causal series. That's different. So like an infinite causal series would be the infinite eternal past. If you're familiar with unapologetic, like I think you said you were, Ian on there holds to this infinite eternal past. I think Justin also holds to this, and Dr. Blitz is agnostic on the question.
Right.
That isn't a problem. That's not an example of an infinite regress that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you have a book, and it's resting on top of another book, and it's resting on top of another book, and it's resting on top of another book, and another book, and another book, and another book. But what is it actually resting on?
Well, is that another example of that? And I could be wrong. I think it's like the hotel rooms where it's like you're booking the room and it goes back and back.
Kind of. The Hilbert's Hotel is addressing a different type of paradox. This is more similar to what's often called the homunculus fallacy.
Okay.
But to get back to the question of like, well, what could it be the universe?
Yes.
That's the next question of the argument is what enables a thing to be independent. And I explore that by kind of looking at, well, that law of identity. So like if something is its own sufficient reason for existing, it must always exist. And if it always exists and is its own sufficient reason to exist, then to say it does not exist isn't just contrary to reality, it's a contradiction. And the difference between something being contrary and being a contradiction is,
yeah, right.
Like,
so contrary is just like it's not something that emerges from like this reality, where contradiction would be A and not A.
Yes.
Okay.
So it has to be it would then be a contradiction to say that it does not exist. Well, what's the not A in independent thing does not exist? Well, its existence. So
Right.
not A for is not existence. Therefore, independent thing must be equal to existence per the law of identity. Therefore, this independent thing must be something whose identity is its own existence. To me, this doesn't seem to map onto the way that we observe the
The
universe
universe.
to be.
Okay.
So I don't think it's proper to put that onto the universe. Now, if someone comes up to then make another argument, then we can compare those arguments. But as I understand it, based on this, one could be rational in making that claim and maybe
Mhm.
have a rational reason for supporting it. It hasn't really been presented to me beyond something not quite what you were doing, but very close to. Well, it seems like it could be the case where, because of these interdependencies, they are now emergently necessary. That's an argument from seemingness. And there are philosophers who hold to seemingness arguments. If you've been listening to Ian's lives, he's talking about in the book club, we're reading Michael Huemer, and Michael Huemer is one of those who holds to this idea of like seemingness is a valid way to arrive at knowledge. I disagree.
Yeah,
Ian disagrees, but
Yes.
that is a valid position within the philosophical community, even if there's people who disagree with it.
I haven't heard his approach to it or critique or anything. But there was, when you said the seamless part, there's actually a comment that I kind of wanted to hear more expansion on as well, where you said we're talking about the universe and you're saying observed otherwise. Can you kind of like expand on that a little bit? What you mean?
Can you rephrase it, because that was a little fast and I wasn't sure I tracked.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're okay.
So there was a comment that they said, "What do you mean we observe otherwise?" And when you said that, it took me a second, but I agree with what they're saying. And could you just kind of expand on that?
Yeah. So of the three possibilities of what makes up reality, we have, because we can agree that it's possible for things to be dependent. We agree that it's possible for things to not be dependent. So of those two possible ways a thing can be, it stands to reason that there's three possible ways for the universe to be. Everything is independent, everything is dependent, or there is some mixture of things that are dependent and independent. If we start with everything, the assumption that everything is independent, well, that contradicts our very observation. We see things that are dependent on other things, like you are dependent on the particular structure of your atoms to be what you are.
Okay.
So therefore we know
No,
the
go
first
ahead.
one isn't the case.
And I don't mean to like be redundant or take it back, but when you talk about infinite regression, you said that there was two things that you said. Yeah, there was what was the other term that you're referring to where it's not necessarily infinite regression, but kind of what was that other term? I missed that.
So there's different ways that it's often described. You'll often hear it as like a benign regression. And that's where kind of like the number line is a benign infinite regression. You take any number and you add one to it, there's a new number. So that's it's also often called in classical literature actual infinite causal chains. So that's the.
Oh, that's what it was. You said actual infinite. Okay.
Yeah.
So when it comes to infinite regression, the way that you had described it was like the book on top of the book on top of the book. But you were saying the problem is, what is the book on?
Yeah, like if the books are stacked on top of each other,
right?
Because each book can't account for its own stability in space. It requires something else to give it that stability. So we add another book, but then that book requires another stability. And if you keep unstable things, where does the stability come from?
Okay, I got it. So I guess my critique for that, when it comes to infinite regression, would be when I'm thinking of infinite regression, I'm aligning it more with like the number line, where it's just a continuous thing back. So with the universe, the reason I don't, because just before I say this, your critique of the infinite regression when it comes to the universe is that it's impossible to have that infinite regression backwards. when
It's
it comes to I shouldn't say the creation, the emergence of the universe.
more of the ontology of its being.
Okay.
So like the question is then, so the critique and the way that the argument goes, and I'm trying to figure out a way to make it a little bit more clear.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Thank you.
But the way that the argument is structured is, because I'm sure you've heard theists make this argument, like this butchering of the Kalam cosmological argument of everything that exists has a cause.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, if
I have an issue with that.
Yeah. Well, the actual phrasing is everything that begins to exist has a cause. If you
Right.
say it that way, you don't run into this issue. But they'll often say everything that exists has a cause. Well, if you say that, now you're saying if God exists, then God requires a cause as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my issue with it.
Now, if God didn't begin to exist, then he doesn't require a cause in the proper phrasing. So then the question is, does the universe have a beginning or not? But regardless, the approach that I'm doing is trying to show something similar to the claim of everything is dependent. If everything is dependent, then that includes so effectively what a lot of people are saying is because each book is self-contained and self-referring to the previous book, we are okay in each of those books on why they're in the position in space that they are and not falling. The question then becomes, okay, so if, what about the full system? What about the full tower of books?
Mm-hmm.
How is it standing? If that requires an explanation, which is the everything is dependent, is saying that everything requires explanation,
right.
including the full set of books, well, then that includes whatever that full set of books is resting on, which whatever that full set of books is resting on is also dependent, which means that also requires an explanation, but that's also dependent and that also requires, so it never actually solves the problem. It never actually provides an explanation.
So then, well, two things. Are you saying that your like God, for your argument, is an independent source and everything else is dependent upon this source?
Yeah.
So what would be the issue with, and again, it's kind of going back to infinite regression, but what would be the issue with, because so you wouldn't say then in my analogy, or I guess my explanation here, that if I'm saying the universe, I wouldn't necessarily know to say if it's independent or dependent because I'm saying it's emergent from different properties. So that would make it dependent, correct? If I'm saying that it's not, the universe isn't, it needs the matter and space-time within it to exist. That would mean it's dependent, correct?
Like it's possible for it to be independent. Like it is, like you could say that independency is an emergent property, and I'm okay with that at this point in the argument. The next question is, and this someone described it, the missing step problem, I think is how they described it. But like in dialogue like this, people like you and I will be able to go from, okay, so we can observe the existing reality, and we can at least agree that there is a need for something independent.
Okay.
But everyone skips the next step of, well, what enables a thing to be independent? And that's what I'm trying to get at in the next step of the argument. And that's where the conversation really needs to be held, is what enables a thing to be independent.
Well, could I then, is it possible then to say, because I guess I'm not seeing, because I'm okay with everything being dependent and it just infinitely existing. I don't know if maybe me saying that has some kind of like fallacy or contradiction within it. I'd be happy to hear that.
That's where you would want to say that independency is an emergent property. So you don't, like, just like how consciousness is an emergent property, no one particular individual part of our biological chemistry leads to consciousness, but all of them combined together make consciousness.
But then you would say then that consciousness is the independent, because the way my brain's working here is I would say that it's still dependent on all of these emergent properties. So I wouldn't say it's like independent, like consciousness isn't independently existing. But maybe I'm hearing that wrong.
Wasn't quite the analogy that I was trying to go for. Like, consciousness is independent of us. Like it was more of to make sure we were on the same page of what an emergent property is. So you can have an infinite chain of all dependent things, while the chain itself is independent. I do think an
Okay.
argument could exist out there to make that argument, but even then you still would not be saying that everything is dependent, because if you're saying
Okay.
that everything is dependent, that includes the chain, which is denying independency as an emergent property.
Okay, because that part is hanging
Yeah.
me up a bit, because I was gonna say that I guess I don't see the problem then, just to take it back to like whether the universe exists
hmm
with or without that independent source you're referring to. If even if we grant that it's it's independent due to to the emergence of these dependent properties. If I'm referring to the universe and there's just an infinite cycle of, like, say we could do like Big Bounce, Big Crunch, where it's just this infinite cycle of in this universe, or sorry, infinite universe existing.
Yeah.
Where is the issue with that? And then if there is, like, how are you getting to this? Because I think you said earlier, like, this idea of the universe could also be sort of like a God of the Gaps type thing. So
Well,
where
no,
are you
more.
getting the?
It's more of, so the way that I see the conversation go is people will say, "Hey, we need this independent thing in order for our our cosmology and our ontology, and understanding of reality, of things existing, to make sense." And you'll have one group say, "And that's God," and you'll have another group say, "And that's the universe."
Right.
So we have this gap, and people are just putting whatever they want into that gap, whether it's God or the universe, without actually looking into what would be able to be independent. And so that's the next step of the conversation is, okay, so now that we've established the need for something to be independent, let's determine the identity of this independent thing.
Right. And if what would be the critique of that being the universe?
So it's not necessarily that there's a critique of that being the universe. It's just that an argument, I feel, hasn't been presented yet, other than just pointing to the fact that it could be eternal. And so,
like, do you just mean put into a syllogism?
Yeah, like I haven't seen an argument presented yet, like just like how Christians will use God of the Gaps willy-nilly. And I don't think that this is being done intentionally, and I don't even think it's the fault of people for doing this. I think it's just a case of people acknowledging that there is a need for something independent and trying to fit something into that box. You'll have people who will say, like, brute contingency, but then when they start describing brute contingencies, it's the same as this independent thing that I'm talking about. Where it's
that's where you have, when you're talking about the brute contingency, that's where you're having the issue with me saying that I don't necessarily agree that there has to be this independent anything. That it all can be dependent on each other. But then that's when we go back to these independent emergent properties. So is that what you were saying with your issue with it, the contingent?
Yeah, it's more, and like I said, like, could it be the case that it's an emergent property? Yes. I haven't seen an argument as to why independency would be an emergent property, but I'm not saying it's not out there.
Okay. Because I still lean towards, I hear what you're saying, but I still, I guess I'm saying I could be agnostic to it. I can take it either way. That it's all dependent. It's just you have some that are emergent from others. In this case, it would be the universe based on my understanding of things like time or matter existing. So I guess that I understand you're saying that it hasn't been an argument presented. But I guess then what would be your, because the issue I'm having with the independent source being something like a God, I find there to be more holes in that. Like, I'm sure you can have like a valid argument for this, but what you were referring to earlier about valid, which, thank you, by the way, for explaining that so many times. I don't know how people don't get this kind of, but
it is
so you can have a valid
tricky.
argument, just not a sound one.
Yeah, it is tricky because the way that we talk normally is like, oh, that's valid, and they mean that that's true. And like, we almost use it in common vernacular in the reverse, where sound
exactly.
is like, that's a good reason to hold to it, and valid means true, when that's not the
Well,
case anymore.
to be fair, when I took philosophy back in college, that was the one I mixed them up all the time, so
Yeah.
that's fair. But I think maybe just hearing it so many times, it's like ingrained in. But my point being is, and someone actually said this in the comments, and I think I keep going back to it, and I'm sorry that if you're explaining it and I'm just missing it.
This is like, I've been studying this for well over 20 years, so my familiarity with it is not something I take for granted, and I don't mind having to explain the same thing over and over again.
Okay, cool. Because I guess I'm stuck up on this idea that it's an independent source is necessary.
Mm-hmm. So this gets into, I think, so you believe that the universe always existed, and that the universe itself, even though it's made of parts that are dependent on each other, the universe itself as a whole is not dependent on anything outside of itself.
Right. Well, hold on. Let me think about that. Because to be completely honest, for the sake of the argument, I'm holding this. I am agnostic to like whether or not the universe is eternal or not.
Yeah.
But I lean towards that due to my understanding of, like I said, space, time, matter, all these things. It's hard for me to understand there being a, I don't even know, because I don't think in the way that most physicists are describing the possibility of not an eternal universe, it's not like they don't think there was nothing, then something.
Yeah.
But that's kind of harder for me to wrap my brain around, I would say. So it's easier for me to grasp an eternal universe. Either way that goes, if I'm holding to this, I just don't. I'm curious to see how you're inserting God in this case, and then what it like if you're saying that it's this independent source. If that source is eternal, how it exists without anything, like kind of like what I'm talking about, the possibility of an independent source being the emergence of. You would say that God isn't an emergent property; it is solely an independent source, right?
So the first step, thanks Nobody on Fire for everything. But the first step is just establishing the need for something to be independent. We haven't identified what that thing is yet. So the first step is trying to get both parties on the same side of the need of something existing independently. Now, right now, like you said, you're agnostic, but slightly leaning towards that could be the universe eternally, infinitely existing. That's fine. This argument has not yet identified what that independent thing is. It's just simply saying there needs to be something independent.
Well, there was a comment. Sorry, there's people have really good input on the comments right now, but there was someone that was mentioning that the universe itself, it's like not an like the universe in itself isn't like an independent entity, I guess is what they're saying. It's more just like a way that these things exist. Is there a critique to that?
Yeah, so that gets into like the way that these things exist. So like the cells inside my body exist inside my body. But it wouldn't be proper to say that I don't exist. I'm just how these cells exist. It seems to me something similar to say that about the universe. Like the universe isn't like we exist inside the universe. And the universe is the collection of all things that exist. And so if this collection of all things that exist as a collective whole is independent, then that's fine. It gets back to that book problem. You either have something external to the books that provide that grounding for the books to stay stable where they are, or it emerges, or that stability is an emergent property where because of how many infinite books you have, even though there's no external grounding to their stability,
you get the tower of books.
Yeah, they then become self-stable. So even though you and I are not independent, once you take all of these independent things and they are now in this existing set, that existing set as a total is now
it's an independent.
Yeah.
See, I guess I don't know if I hear what you're saying, and I think that's a fair like analysis of it, but I don't know if it's like you would say the universe is an independent source, or if it's just a mode of which it exists, like these things, like it's like where or how these things exist together.
Let
Is
me
that is saying that is that still implying that it's the independent source?
Yeah, so the way that I define dependent and independent is
Yeah, that might help.
very particular. So dependent means is reliant on something outside of itself.
Right. Okay.
Independent is the negation of that. So if the universe as a set exists because of the things inside it, that doesn't make it dependent because it's still inside it. It then becomes
Okay.
a question if it's dependent on something outside of it. And if it's not dependent on something outside of it, just on things that are inside it, then it's independent.
Wait, so then you're saying that if your God is an independent source, it's dependent upon what's within it?
Kind of, in a sense, yeah. Like the argument that I go for is like the identity of this independent thing. So this is like where I was getting at. It's like, so the argument before the one I'm about to present you is just establishing that there needs to be something independent. The next step is we have to identify what that
What the independent is.
Yep.
Okay,
So,
got it.
from the definition, an independent thing requires nothing external for its existence.
Wait,
There-
sorry, say it one more time, a little slower. I'm sorry. I'm trying to
You're
follow
all right.
track. And I don't have a journal like I usually do to write it down, so
You're
I'm
okay.
cleaning.
You're okay. So this is just based on the definition. So an independent thing requires nothing external for its existence. That's just the definition.
Okay.
From the principle of no, not the principle of sufficient reason. The efficient cause, I think, or oh man, the term slipped. It's been a long morning. But where if A is sufficient for B, the presence of A always means B, whatever that principle is called. But if something doesn't require anything external for its existence, it means that itself is its own sufficient reason for its own existence. Therefore,
If it doesn't require anything external. So what would be, just to, before you go further on that one, okay, when we're talking about the universe and we're talking about these different properties, the emergence of creates this, what we would consider the universe. I guess to me, that's almost like saying these are external factors emerging the universe. I guess what would be what's your difference between internal and external? Because like when you're talking about the body, for example, you were saying the cells are what make up this external, but it's really just the collection of cells are this thing.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that gets into like the idea of like consciousness as an emergent property. So the like atoms exist outside of me, and it is the arrangement of those atoms that make me be me, and it is the arrangement of those atoms that I emerge from it. So even so I am dependent on atoms existing in order for me to exist. Now it could be the case that when you already have all of this stuff already and the universe is just the collection of stuff already existing, you could make an argument that maybe necessity is an emergent property. But the way that this argument is going is more of, all right, let us try to identify, what enables a thing to be independent. There's several ways to go about proving a position. The first is just straight up proving the position that you're holding. And the second way is to show the contradiction to hold the opposite position.
Wait, I'm so sorry because I love what you're saying. Can you give me like 30 seconds? I just got a call. Give me 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're all right. But welcome.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Would you mind rephrasing that last portion you did?
So there's two ways to prove a conclusion, or like two major ways. The first is just straight up proving the conclusion.
Okay.
The second way is showing the contradiction inherent within the negation. Like my favorite example of this is parallel lines having only one point in common. Well, you can't prove the positive claim, like it's almost geometrically impossible to do so directly. You have to show the inherent contradiction with the negative claim of, or the contrary to it, of where parallel or non-parallel lines have more than one point in common.
Okay, because I sorry to cut you there quickly, because this just the way my brain's working, it took me right to your God. So I think there could be contradiction. Well, before I say this, just to be clear, when we were talking, so for example, we're talking about the universe, we're saying that it is an independent source. I'm granting what you were saying, like it is an independent source based on these emergent properties. What would be if you were saying
that's a possibility within the argument? Like
right,
the reason why I have the argument phrased the way that it is because I've been doing this like on Reddit for a very long time, so I'm very familiar with how this can sound to a lot of people, where I'm trying to prove the universe as a temporal beginning. That's not what I'm trying to prove, and I don't need to prove that to get to the type of independent thing that I'm talking about. So
maybe that's what can you expand a little bit on how this is how we're viewing the universe as the independent, but when it comes to your God, because where my contradiction was lying is if you're saying that an independent source is like, and then I guess I was wrong on this, but I thought you were saying that it is an emergent property, but your God, if it's truly like this independent source, how does it exist then independently if it's not an emergent of other variables?
Yeah. So, and that's what this second argument is. So, like, or the next argument. So, like, my brain works very uniquely, essentially. Or I don't know if I want to say uniquely.
I can relate to that.
But the way that my brain works in this question is, all right, let us start from as far back as we need to in order to find some kind of commonality. And the very first thing that we can agree on is that things exist. So the first question is it the case that things always existed, or is it the case that there was nothing at some point? And then I provide an argument showing that it is the case that there always had to be something. There was never...
Right. I agree with that part.
Yep.
Right.
Then the next question, which is what we've been talking about the most, and this is where a lot of confusion comes from, because I think people don't understand what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to figure out a better way to phrase it to help make that make a little bit more sense, that there must be at least one independent thing. We haven't yet identified what enables a thing to be independent, just that there needs to be something independent. Whether independence is an emergent property or not, or whatever that is, however it is independent, we haven't yet identified that. We've just established the need for something to be independent.
Actually, because I think I still can have critiques on that one, but let's grant this because I want to hear that second part.
Yeah. So then the second part is then, all right, once we've established the need for something to be independent, what enables a thing to be independent? And the way that the argument goes is an independent thing requires nothing external for its existence, which is just the definition of independent. It is therefore sufficient for its own existence. Because it is sufficient for its own existence, it always existed.
Can you say that from the independent one more time, and then it goes into how it's necessary? It exists on its own.
That's not the end of the argument yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we just established that if something is independent, it means it always exists.
Right. Okay. Got it.
That's all that that part has stated.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a couple more steps going on, but that's just like, all right. So we've identified that if something is independent, it always exists.
Okay.
For an independent thing, the claim it does not exist must be a contradiction because of the fact that it always exists and is its own reason for its existing.
It's its own reason for its existing. What do you mean by that?
That's
Like
from
just the fact that it's necessary that it exists.
yeah, it is
Like
therefore
eternally.
sufficient for its own existence is the same as it is its own reason for existing.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
So for an independent thing, the claim it does not exist must be a contradiction. For a negation to be a contradiction, its existence must be identical to its very identity. And this was what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where there's a difference between something being contrary and being a contradiction. The statement, the door is open, when the door is actually closed, is not a contradiction. It's just contrary to reality. Versus the door is not a door, where we are now negating its identity. That's a contradiction. So the phrase, the independent thing does not exist. We've established that to say that is a contradiction, just like it's a contradiction to say a married bachelor. So
yeah, I mean, because this is where I guess I'm getting hung up too, and I know that we went over this before, but I'm still having a hard time fully with accepting that it's possible that there isn't necessarily an independent anything, that everything could be dependent upon each other. But I know that when we're talking about it being this emergent, how that's possible to be independent, but if the way I'm viewing like the universe, for example, being this emergent of different entities that are existing or that are coexisting, I guess you could say. I don't necessarily know if I'm still agreeing that that means that the universe in itself is this independent, that it's not necessarily just a mode of which these things exist. Is when I'm saying a mode of which these things exist, is there any kind of like contradiction or anything there, any kind of fallacy to say that, well, now you're stating it's an independent?
Well, it's not that. So, and this is what I come across. Do you watch Allegedly Ian by chance?
No, I've seen some Unapologetics on Sunday, but that's really this kind of as far as it goes.
Okay. Are you aware that they hold to mathematical Platonic forms and they believe in the mathematical objects necessarily eternally existing?
I think I've heard them say that before.
Okay.
On the Unapologetic. Are they like a Platonist?
Yeah, they're a mathematical Platonist specifically. So like they don't hold to the idea that there is the form of humans existing platonically. Only mathematical objects exist platonically for them.
And uniquely mathematical objects, not other like sort of abstract thoughts or ideas.
Yes.
Okay.
So for them, mathematical objects are this independent thing.
Okay.
So what I find a lot of people do is they
Although, to be fair, I'm pretty sure they're a double math major, so there's some bias there.
Yes. But the point that I was getting at, and the reason why I was bringing them up, is people get hung up on the term of independent thing because of the abuse theists have done to that term. Where as soon as someone says independent thing, they say, and you just agreed to God. Well, no, you haven't. You just agreed to something being independent. That's it. So when you're talking about like this mode exists that enables all other things to exist, yes, that's that. And if that mode isn't dependent on something else that enables other things to exist, then yes, that is that independent thing that I'm talking about.
Okay. I can grant that. So because that was kind of like a side tangent from the argument that you were presenting earlier, where I was saying, okay, I'm hung up on this idea of that the dependent independent. So let's grant that then. So what was that second part that you were referring to after this?
So for the negation to be a contradiction, its existence must be identical to its very identity. So when we say this independent thing does not exist, well, the not exist is the not a part of the contradiction, correct?
Yes.
And the independent thing is the a part of the contradiction, right?
Right, sure.
So from the law of identity, a equals a, right?
Yes. No. Wait, because you're saying that it's A is sufficient for B. Well, sorry, say that one more time. I misheard you. Will you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we say that for the independent thing, it does not exist is a contradiction. And we've established that a contradiction is A, not A, correct?
Not A, right. Yeah. Right.
Okay. So we have the first A is the independent thing, correct?
Yes.
And exist is the second A to fulfill the does not part, correct?
Right.
So we've established that independent thing does not exist is a contradiction. And from the law of identity,
This
A
follows.
equals A, right?
Right.
So that means the independent thing is equal to existence. It means that its identity is its own existence.
Are you saying then it's a necessity? It's necessary?
So the independent thing is comparable to what a lot of people say is necessary. But the idea
Maybe that's where the thing that's coming from.
Yeah, it is comparable to the terminology of necessary, but I'm trying to avoid that terminology because I know of people's hangups with it. But what it is that like the necessity aspect of it that I'm concerned with is contained in the an independent thing requires nothing external for its existence. It is therefore sufficient for its own existence. Because it's sufficient for its own existence, it must have always existed.
Okay, so you're saying that how are you relating this to God, if you don't mind, if you can put this
Yes.
into like sort of an analogy of how you view your God existing?
Yeah. So this gets into where the independent thing's existence or identity is existence itself. In classical theology and Thomistic thought, essence is the same as identity, and Thomas Aquinas famously concluded and argued that God's identity or his essence is his own existence. So if you were to ask what God is, just like you were to ask, hey, Catholic thinker, what are you? I would say a human male.
Mm-hmm.
You ask God, what are you? He would say existence.
So, but then this kind of, I don't know. I guess I'm not familiar with Is it Thomism? Is like his
Thomistic, yeah. Thomistic thought. Yeah. But you'll also find it in Moses Maimonides, and who is a Jewish rabbi who predated Thomas Aquinas, and you'll also find it in Islamic thought, Avicenna.
So in this thought process, you're saying if you're saying God is existence,
Mm-hmm.
is it not the same as how I'm viewing the universe as an independent, and to say that its existence is, that the universe is what we'd consider like existence, where I'm talking about it being the emergence of all these properties which exist. So is that not similar? Because then it feels like you're getting sort of into, rather than what I imagine as a Catholic, you view God as a mind, right? So something that's going to have.
That's going to get into the problem of divine simplicity. God doesn't have a mind like we do. In fact, it's an equivocation fallacy to even say that. Like, we're equivocating when we say that God has a mind. He has.
Well, do you hold to, not to go too far from this topic and to kind of like, when I know that we're trying not to narrow it necessarily, but do you hold to, like scripture as a Catholic?
Yeah.
So in scripture, when God is having conversations or having like direct emotions, even based on decisions he's making, like the regret he might feel or anger, whatever it is.
Yep.
How are you then taking it away from this idea that he is a mind, and you're saying like not like necessarily like a mind like ours? Because I would disagree, given scripture, that it is sort of like a mind like ours, in the sense that there's like a progression of thought. These progression of thoughts lead to emotional reactions. This is going to be something that's very similar to how we think. So if that's the case, it kind of seems like when you're saying that God is existence in of itself, that you are negating this entire entire aspect of your God, right?
Yeah. So this gets to Saint Augustine. He almost quite literally wrote the book on Catholic biblical hermeneutics and the way to approach understanding Scripture. And we don't like, and this isn't to belittle Protestant theology or anything like that. But but Protestants tend to treat divine inspiration of the scriptures almost as if God was dictating the Bible to the authors. The Catholic Church doesn't view the scriptures in that way. The Catholic Church believes that the authors wrote truths of salvation history, and that's what was protected, was simply the truth of salvation history. Not even like theology. They were free to describe that salvation history in whatever language they saw fit, however it appeared to them. And God just made sure that the message of that salvation history was preserved through their
Oh, well,
writing.
there's a contradiction right there.
Okay.
Because you're saying that he did this in a way to preserve this thing. That is still him deliberating. That is still him having a thought process about something and that coming to fruition.
So
That to
that
me is
that
still a mind.
so that's getting into what I was about to describe as
Okay,
far as
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So and I understand like there's that tension there. So the way that I like to describe it is it's divine simplicity is benevolent cosmic horror. If you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft's stories of like Cthulhu and the other cosmic entities,
I am not familiar.
all right. Very problematic man and has some problematic world building, but the way that he described cosmic horror is very compelling. But regardless, when he's describing these cosmic entities that are so vast, that are so far above and beyond our ability to understand as these puny human minds, like the common comparison is like, imagine you gave the fullness of human understanding to an ant for a brief moment, and now this ant is going to try to describe that to its fellow ants. It can't. Like,
it's going to fall apart on itself.
The language and mental capacity for it to just try to describe that human reality is so far beyond what it's able to do. So anytime it tries to describe the truth of the reality that it saw, it's going to fail. That's what God is to us.
Well, so then, but if you're saying you hold to scripture, and I understand what you're talking about with, and actually to be, I was raised, I was not Catholic, I was non-denominational, so I'm not like super familiar with the church fathers or kind of how this all comes together through Catholicism, but to me it sounds like you are presupposing a lot of what scripture is implying or how it's interpreted, whereas rather than taking it, if you believe it's divine, do you believe it's divine, or I guess you would say it's not, or it's not infallible. It is fallible.
It can be fallible in matters of like human history, in matters of appearances, of the sciences and things like that. But in regard specifically to just salvation history, that being we are the creation of God, we fell away from His grace, and He is working through human history to bring us back into His salvation. The
way you describe it, like I hear what you're saying of kind of how you're getting these ideas, but the way you're describing it, it's still coming across to it doesn't. I should say it doesn't align with how you're describing God being God is just existence.
Yeah.
That to me seems to fall apart a bit.
Yeah, so the reason I was bringing up that cosmic entity analogy, Aristotle talks about how the way that we can come to understand something is we take a thing and we start to break it apart conceptually. The way that you understand who I am is you take my personality apart. Oh, Catholic thinker is all of these different things. And it is by breaking those down that you start to have this understanding of what I am. But what if I presented to you something that you can't break down? Well, there's nothing to break down for you to come to a further understanding of it.
Well, are you saying that God is something you can't break down?
Yes. So if God is just existence itself, like only existence, then there's nothing. It's not existence plus something else. It's just existence.
But what is existence?
It is the act of being. And I know that it's getting like very unsatisfactory answer.
Yeah.
But like that's the whole point that Aristotle is making, is that like if you were to say, well, what is Catholic thinker? Well, he is a physical creature of the Homo sapien. Like you're breaking me down, right?
So you exist, right?
You just are not existence, but existence is not what I am.
Okay. So how are you getting to this idea then that God is just not something that exists, but that is existence.
Yeah.
Are you saying just because it's the independent source?
Yes.
That seems a little, doesn't that seem a little like, not circular? Well, maybe, because
So
you're saying that an independent source is something that exists, obviously not dependent on anything else, but then you're saying God is existence.
well,
Wouldn't that mean that?
it's
Yeah,
more of
go ahead, go ahead.
it's more of what I'm doing here, or attempting to do here, is get to, we have this independent thing, and we've identified that to say that this independent thing does not exist leads to a contradiction. Therefore, we can conclude that the identity of this independent thing is existence itself. As existence itself, it is the grounding of all of other things that exist. And because God is the term that we put on whatever is the grounding for all other things that exist, we will call it God. So
But see, so, I'm so sorry, not to cut you off. If I interrupt, just tell me if I'm doing too much. I have bad ADHD. That's how, but that means I'm engaging with you if I'm interrupting. So, if that's the case, because when you first said this originally, before we went on this tangent about like, okay, what is existence, what is mind? That's kind of the issue I'm having. Is, you know how there's some people, and I say this respectfully, but there's some, I don't like this so much when people do it, when they're just like, well, God is just God is everything. It's not like they have really, like, in my opinion, and colloquially how we use God, it is a mind that created the universe, or it is a mind, right? It's something that has thought processes.
Will, yeah.
Right, exactly. So when you're saying, well, it's just existence, to me, you're kind of teetering that line now of those individuals that might be like, well, God is just this. And then I'm like, okay, well, then you can literally insert I can just say the universe is God. And to me, that's unsatisfactory to kind of where you're trying to head with this, where this being the God of the Bible.
Yeah. And I understand that, and I agree that annoys me as well. Like, God is love, and love exists, therefore God. Yeah. Like, I agree with you that I do not like that, and I don't believe that's what I'm doing here. But that's partially why I'm excited
to expand on it.
Yeah.
I'm
excited to bring this up to Unapologetic, because they'll be able to help identify it. But what I'm trying to do here is, effectively, if I was to ask you, Abby, hey, what type of thing would I need to show you for you to be able to say that's God? And at the bare basic necessity within philosophical conversation, the most agreed upon bare necessity is that it is the ultimate grounding of all things that exist. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily require a mind. That's the one that most people like Justin, Dr. Blitz, and Ian are interested in arguing against, because it's hard to argue against a deistic God, one that doesn't have a mind, or at least doesn't interact with reality. But philosophically speaking, that's still a God. And so what I'm doing here is like, all right, so we've established that there is this independent thing. We've established that this is existence itself, and because it's existence itself, it would be the reason that other things can get existence. And that fits the terminology that we have, philosophically speaking, for a bare necessity of God. The next step, which is what you're getting at, is, well, then how do you show that this is the God of the Bible?
Right. Because it seems like,
yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because I hear what you're saying, and to me, it's like, so far I can grant what we've discussed. It's just, I can grant it and also say everything we're talking about can be the universe, being this independent emergent property that's not necessarily having like these thought progressions, right?
Yeah,
it's just an emergent, it's existence. But when we take it to where I think you need to, for your entire argument to be sound, based upon the God that you believe in specifically, which I'm curious to see how you take this further. But to me, then when you introduce this God of the Bible, or any like Abrahamic or kind of the God that maybe they're referring to, is that it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's like it being a mind that is existence, to me, is contrary to our reality, right? We've never seen a mind exist that, and I think you actually earlier said a really cool fallacy, the black swan fallacy. I actually haven't heard of that before, but I love that analogy, or that depiction of it. So I guess you could maybe argue that
it's very similar to the argument from ignorance, but yeah.
Right, but that being said, is of our understanding of a progression of thoughts, if the only way we've seen this is through an emergence of like consciousness, like physical
Mhm.
properties that allow for this to ensue on itself, I don't see there being a rational way to view a mind that is not physical.
Yeah.
That's where I can grant everything else, but now taking it to where I'd hope you can, when you're talking about the Abraham or Yahweh,
Yeah.
how you're then saying that this entity, although having progression and thought patterns and emotions it emotes, or he emotes, how you're now saying that is in of itself existence, because that seems
Yeah.
contrary, or maybe contradictory. I don't know.
So that's where Thomas Aquinas and like the dogma of divine simplicity comes in, explaining about the language of appearances. And you were talking about like, you could say like, if the argument that I presented on like we have this independent thing that is existence, I don't think you can slot the universe into that because you're a part of the universe, right?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
But you're not me, and I'm also a part of the universe, right? So we're two divisible parts of the universe, right?
Yes.
If the argument as I presented is sound, then that means that if something is just existence, it can't have these divisible parts like you and I. Therefore, it can't be the universe. But that's
Well,
my argument.
whoa, but if you're saying that, and so, by the way, my thing's just my what do you call them? My headphones just died. Can you still hear me, or is it
Yes,
echoey?
No, I can hear you.
Wait, hold on one second. Give me 1 second.
Mhm.
Okay, will you say something?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Sorry, that got distracting. What was I saying? Okay, so you were saying that the reason that you think the universe can't be this, or like synonymous with what we're talking about with God being existence, is you're saying that the universe has parts that aren't necessarily what was the word you said? Like you were using us as an example.
Yeah, so because you're distinct from me, like we are divisible parts of the universe. Like I can identify this part, me, as distinct and separate from you as a part of the universe.
Okay. So, but then that's what, yeah. So, how
existence?
Wouldn't you say if God is existence? Wouldn't you say that okay, then can you? Because maybe I misunderstood. Then, when you say God is existence, what do you mean by that? Like, what? How is that not just if it's not what I'm thinking of, then you're just basically saying existence is an independent source, and independent source is existence.
Basically, yeah. I mean, so that's what that logic train of for that negation to be a contradiction, its existence must be identical to its identity, and for the claim of independent thing does not exist means that exist is the identity of independent thing. So when you say exist as an object, as independent thing, they're one and the same due to the transitive property and the law of identity.
Okay, so do you mind taking this to Yahweh? Because I know if you haven't like developed the argument, because I think you were saying that you're working on it. That's okay. I have a lot to consider with what we've already spoke on.
I do have the skeleton of it.
I would love to hear that if you're cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and just to let you know, once I get to the establishment of there being an independent thing, I do have one more step where it's just like, and there can only be one independent thing.
Okay.
But we can.
Why would that be the case?
So because the independent thing is pure existence itself, if there were two or more independent things, because independent thing is existence itself, they would both be pure existence and share exactly the same property. But due to the law of identity, two things that share exactly the same properties are identical, not distinct. Therefore, there can only be one independent thing.
Okay, that's okay. We can go forward with that.
So from that part of the work that I'm hoping to do, I'm going to be moving away from like, okay, this is definitively true and you can take this to the bank, to this seems possible and plausible and likely, But you're still free to disagree with it and still be just as plausible, likely, and true as I am. So we're going to be moving away from this rigid logistical structure that
to possibilities.
Exactly.
Sure.
When you look at the history of metaphysics, which is what we've been engaged in, the earliest that you can kind of start getting to this idea of independent thing whose identity is existence, you could make an argument that it started with Aristotle. He described something called thought thinking itself, but even then, he still had this independent thing as being existence plus other stuff. It wasn't until you started getting to Moses Maimonides, who lived in like the 12th century, so like the 1100s AD, where you started getting this idea of maybe this is something that exists where its existence is its identity, like we've been talking about. And he started to play around with it. You got some Islamic philosophers starting to play around with it, but it wasn't until Thomas Aquinas where it was finally solidified. So it wasn't until about the 1200s where you got this idea of an independent thing whose identity is its existence. But when we look at history, there's only one group that claims to worship a being whose identity is its existence, and that's the Abrahamic faith. And the reason why I say that is when you look in the text, when God reveals his name to Moses, the cultural understanding is that he's not revealing his name like I would say, hey, my name's Catholic Thinker. He's revealing his identity, his whatness, like what makes him be what he is. And his name, his identity that he reveals is I am that I am, or I am.
Well, there's one, and it to be fair, it's grounded, I believe, in the Abrahamic. It was a derivative that was way back when, and I forget what it was called. Maybe you'll know, but it's this idea that from this God, they actually think that Yahweh, for example, is one of two. Like there's really these two ones that represent good and evil, and I forget what is it.
Zoroastrianism, I think is the name.
Say that again.
Zoroastrianism?
No, that one, I know you're familiar with that one. It's another one. It was I wish I could remember. Because basically it's saying that there's these two. There's like this God that is all good, but there's this God that's all evil. And then there is one above it that is everything.
I don't know about that one. I know Zoroastrianism, it just stops at the purely good and the purely evil God.
There's one that's like it's above. Oh God, I wish I could remember because it's really cool. It was considered obviously heretical, but wouldn't that kind of negate this idea of what you're saying that the Abrahamic is saying that I am that I am? It could take it a step further.
If you can find that and let me know, because I haven't heard it.
Actually, yeah. Here, give me. I'm gonna teacup because I'm gonna look it up. I can still hear you, but I'm gonna try to find it really quick because I want to remember. It's pretty cool. Hold on.
Yeah, and I'm also gonna follow you so that way then you can message. Or I think I already did. Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah.
Then you can message me. But the point that I was getting at is, this being reveals its identity as being itself to. Based on biblical scholarship, the earliest writings that we have of the term Yahweh, of I am that I am, is about, I want to say 200 to 300 years before Aristotle even existed, and before the Jewish people were exposed to Greek philosophical thought with the Alexander conquest. And from there, to me, it suggests a possible anachronistic idea. It would be very similar to like opening up an ancient text and discovering the formula to make an atomic bomb. Like that shouldn't exist. The idea of God as whose identity is its own being is philosophically anachronistic in my perspective, at least.
Well, I guess what I'm, and maybe you are explaining this and I missed it, but I guess I'm still confused as to how you are like saying that this Abrahamic God is the only one that can fill in this idea of like this independent source that you're referring to.
Yeah, so if it is the case that like when God revealed his name, he was revealing his identity, what he is. His identity is I am. Well, what is I am but the first person verb of to be, which is the act of existence.
So, but do you think God is all good?
And so that gets into the divine simplicity. He is not good in the sense that we would understand where good is a part of him. But when we experience God, we experience something that we identify as good. And so we describe it analogously, even though there isn't like a part of him that we could point to and say, that's good.
Right, because if you're saying he is existence, doesn't this run into like, he is also the bad and horrible things that exist?
In Catholic thought, the understanding of good and evil is just like how dark is the absence of light.
Mm-hmm.
Evil is the absence of good. So God is the source of all good, but it's when we block out God, so to speak, that's what we experience as evil.
Well, if he's existence, isn't it contrary to say you can block him out? Like that, like you would say that. Like, do you think then there's anything? Is there anything that you would consider to be within existence to be like pure? It's hard for me to say this because I don't necessarily agree with the terms good and evil, but you would say is like pure evil, pure bad, or pure absence of God. Because if he's existence, isn't that to say that he is all things?
So even the biggest evil thing that you're going to find in Christianity, I think we can agree, would be Satan. And even Thomas Aquinas says like Satan himself is not purely evil because he still has being, and that being is
God.
Well, it is still good.
Yeah. Okay.
And because he still has being, there's still good in him. But what he does with his being is not good. So it's not that like God is creating this evil. It's more of, in the words of Tolkien, I think he really put it beautifully. Evil cannot create. It can only corrupt and destroy what good has created. That is the Catholic understanding of evil, where it's not a thing in and of itself. It's when you take something that is good and distort it and twist it and corrupt it.
So and I guess I have only, I guess, one more question or so, and I do have to get going. But before I go, I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's been really interesting. I have a lot to like consider and I want to look further into. But would you say then, so if God is existence, you agree that the universe is eternal? If you're saying God is existence, because there wouldn't be a point then that you think like he brought everything into existence.
Correct. Yes. So
okay.
So yeah, and so you'll hear people say, "Oh, as a Catholic, you have to believe that the universe had a beginning." I believe both can be true. And
I love to hear that.
Someone even brought this up to Dr. Blitz once in a super chat, and he affirmed that this is possible, where you do have an eternal B theory universe, but there's still a first moment and a last moment, and I believe that there is a first moment and a last moment, while the whole block is eternal.
Okay, because I was gonna say, so then you don't think that there is a moment that God exists alone, right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, well then that clears that up. The other question I had. Well, this has been, I gotta get going. I'm like way past my time.
I actually like have to be done by 12:30, but because I know that sometimes I'll get lost in a conversation, I try to have my cutoff time at 11. So I'm actually, I'm not like late, but an hour over my scheduled time. So.
I know I have a friend coming, and that's one of the calls I got, and I was like, oh God, I got it. But it's been really, really interesting. So are you having any other guests? I was going to listen further. Or are you going to end it here?
I'm going to go ahead and finish it up here because I'm an hour past my scheduled time.
Okay. Well, I've really enjoyed it. How often do you go live? I don't know if I've seen you go live before on your own.
I have actually just started this week trying to do it consistently. I'm trying to do it between 9 and 11 Monday through Friday Central Time.
Oh,
So
cool. I don't work on a Thursday or Friday, so I'll try to catch you. And that gives me some time. I have a lot to consider, and I'd love to come back up and have further critiques.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to be clear, like the whole purpose of this is mostly to answer questions and to provide insights, not to convince anyone to hold my positions.
Well, I think that you have some what you present is very well thought out. So it's really interesting, and it gives you a lot to like think over. So. Catholic thinker. That's funny. Okay, well, I hope you have a really good rest of your day, and I'll see you
You
around.
too. It was nice talking to you.
Same.
All right. So for anyone else in the guest box, like I said, I am going to go ahead and end it here. But I do appreciate y'all for coming. Like I said, I'm going to be trying to do this on the regular basis as far as, during the week, Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 Central Time. It is currently noon where I am at here. So whatever that adjustment looks like for you, and looking forward to continuing the conversations, in the future.